Good evening and welcome to our September meeting. I am vaguely aware that there's a football game going on later on tonight. I'll do my best to make sure that we run a productive and efficient meeting this evening. Barb, can you call roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Beveridge?
Here.
Mr. Boyd?
Here.
Mr. Connell?
Here.
Mr. Kuhn?
Here.
Mrs. Steele?
Here.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Here.
Dr. Yurkovich?
Here.
I'd like to welcome our guests from Prairie Center Elementary forward to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. McMullen.
Well, good evening and welcome to Red Thursday Board of Education edition. I'd like to say our Board of Education, it looks great in red, except for one Chargers fan up there apparently, but we'll just have to move on. So that being said, thank you for attending tonight's meeting. Before we begin, we feel it's important that we review the importance of conducting a productive and orderly meeting. This meeting is designated for the board to work with the superintendent and staff to conduct the work as outlined in the agenda. Please understand that patrons attending the meeting do so solely in an observatory role. Out of respect for everyone in attendance, we request that audience members not speak, yell, or give applause during the meeting, with the exception of recognitions. This ensures the board, staff, and other attendees are able to listen and understand the business conducted. Anyone disrupting the meeting in any capacity will be asked to leave and may lose the opportunity to attend future meetings. Thank you again for attending, and we'll now proceed with the agenda.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to 2.01. Is there a motion?
Move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second. We have a motion by Mr. Beveridge and a second by Mr. Wycliffe.
Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
Mr. Boyd?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
Dr. Yurkovich?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. All right, moving on to our recognitions and awards. Becky?
Yes, good evening. I always love to see a packed house for recognition, so this is exciting. Welcome to all of our guests tonight. We are proud tonight to recognize our 2022-23 Presidential Service Award winners. We had 37 Olathe Volunteers Serving Schools members that achieved an amazing level of volunteer hours to earn this recognition. So I'd like to invite our volunteers to join me up front, along with Director of Community Development Heather Schoonover, and Pam Wolf, Susan Brooks, and Kathy McDonald, who coordinate our team of volunteers. So come on up. For 30 years, Olathe's dedicated community volunteers consistently support our district's students and staff. District volunteers serve in a variety of roles, including one-on-one mentors, support our classrooms, office support, and special projects. During the 2022-23 school year, 547 community patrons dedicated 19,622 volunteer hours of service. With a focus of connecting the community to the classroom, the Volunteers Serving Schools program is happy to announce that they are celebrating their 30th year of the program and have had a 94% increase in members reaching Presidential Service Award hours. That's amazing. So without further ado, we are pleased to recognize the following volunteers. We had 29 honorees who earned the Bronze Service Award for donating 100 to 249 hours of service. And they are Wendy Andrew, Georgiana Bokel, Nancy Brooks, Debbie Cooley, Claire Eney, Melissa Hanlon, Greg Hartman, Steve Hill, Gloria Hinduja, Mary Ann Hinkle, Susie Kaminsky, Mikla Kanakasaba, Carrie Kiger, Raina Cole, Kathy Menser, Suzanne Moore, Sue O'Connor, Mary Pacey, Jan Pitcairn, Judy Schwans, Beth Sykes, Alice Smotherman, Debbie Wallace, Jan Wessels, Debbie White, Amy Williams, Jane Wilson, Linda Winter, and Patty Whitty. Congratulations to our bronze winners. We had 5 honorees earn the Silver Service Award for donating 250 to 499 hours of service. They are Linda Albee, Kay Beck, Jeannie Bond, Michael Christensen, and Jerry Sapp. Congratulations. And finally, we had 3 honorees earn the Gold Service Award for dedicating more than 500 hours of service. They are Ken Johnson, Jan Wise, and Sue Zawicki. We're probably going to need to scooch in.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is good. Ready?
Thank you, guys. Gosh, that makes my heart happy to see all of those community members. And that's not even everyone that came tonight, so pretty amazing. All right, next up, we would like to give a shout out to the Kansas 6A softball state champions, the Olathe West Owls. Come on up, our student athletes, come on up with any administrators, coaches. The Olathe West Owls defeated Washburn Rural High School 10-0 in the championship game in Lawrence back in May. This was their first trip to state in just the 5th year of the program's existence. In attendance with us this evening, we have state champions Malia Warren, Brevin Kelly Porras, Bella Jaso, Kyla Crawford, Emma Heineman, Aubrey Barnard, and Hadley Baum. The Owls were also led by a group of 6 seniors who are not able to be here today as they have since graduated, but we wanted to be sure to take this opportunity to recognize them by name. And they are Madison Walker, who is the reigning 2022-23 Kansas Gatorade Player of the Year in softball, Madison Grant, Emma Veach, Allie Miller, Selena Tipton, and Rory Hornung. Congratulations, you guys. We're so proud of you.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
All right, Mr. Butler, you may want to stay up front because you're up next again. So continuing on with our outstanding athletes, Olathe Public Schools had many competitors on both the team and individual side take home medals at the 6A State Track and Field Championships at Wichita State in May. Up first, we would like to honor our team and individual champions from Olathe West, so if you could please join us up front. Starting with the team championships, the Olathe West girls team won the state title with a team score of 112. Congratulations to the Lady Owls. And Dr. Yeager, I think they might have a plaque. Perfect, they may. And then we are also pleased to recognize state champions in the girls 4x800 relay, and they'll have individual certificates. So Paige Baker, Liz Browning, Lainey Clements, Kaylin Willingham, as well as our boys high jump state champion, Elijah Hakeem. Unable to join us tonight, but still worthy of a recognition, is our girls 1600 meter run state champion, Sharice Robinson. Congratulations, Owls. Okay, now I'd like to recognize some of our individual champions from Olathe Northwest. So can I please have all Olathe Northwest athletes, coaches, administrators join us up front? Tonight, we are pleased to recognize Olivia Cooper, who was the state champion in the girls 100-meter hurdles. Val Galligan, who was the state champion for girls javelin and girls discus. And Mishana Aratus, who was the state champion in girls long jump. As well as Adrian Locke Garcia, who was our girls shot put state champion. Unable to join us tonight was Kyle Souders. He was the boys javelin state champion, but again, wanted to recognize him by name. Congratulations, you guys.
Wait, don't forget the parent pictures.
Yes.
We forgot those in the earlier years. Might have been parents with volunteers too.
Before we move completely on from state championships, I would be remiss if I didn't also recognize our Olathe North and Olathe East folks. They couldn't be here with us tonight because they have either since graduated or are in fall sports, and those are in full swing. But our boys team at Olathe North was the state team in track and field. They also had several individual champions. A relay team champion, and then at Olathe East, Brett Carroll was our boys shot put state champion. So proud of all of our high schools who represented us at state track and field. All right, last but certainly not least tonight, we are excited to honor two students for their recent debate success. Can Isabella Foster and Hannah Cleveland please join us up front along with your debate coach and administrators? This past Memorial Day weekend, Olathe North juniors Isabella and Hannah finished third in the nation at the annual Grand National Tournament in Louisville, Kentucky, sponsored by the National Catholic Forensic League. Every year they host 6 speech events and 4 debate events. Foster and Cleveland went to the elimination rounds as the 13th seed. They beat the 20th seed team in the first elimination round and then defeated the 3rd and 4th seeds before ultimately losing to the number 1 overall seed in the semifinals. They represented Olathe so well, and we are extremely proud of you guys. Congratulations. Any parents want to come get photos? You're welcome to come up front. Now's your shot. All right, that concludes our recognition.
Thank you, Becky. I feel like we should have ended that with a DJ Khaled, All I Do Is Win.
Next time.
All right, as we move on to 4.01, I just want to remind the board of board policy BCDF, or rules of order. Please wait until you're recognized by the president before you ask your questions to our guests. And with that being said, we're going to hear from Principal Sean Bohan at Prairie Center.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Sean Bohan, and I'm the proud principal at Prairie Center. But thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to highlight everything that we have at Prairie Center. So, Prairie Center's interpretation of what a pioneer has evolved since we opened in 1980. But since 2018, we've settled on Billy the Bison as our mascot for the 360 students that call Prairie Center their home. Tonight, I'd like to highlight 3 different areas: student engagement, community engagement, and our staff. PC's theme for the past couple years has been every student, every day, no matter what. And this is our why. So how do we achieve this? We start their day off right. Here's a short clip of what our morning announcements look like at PC. 2 staff members, Pam Shimke and Sharon McCartney, guide students, but students run the show.
Good morning. I'm Leah. And I'm Avery. What? I thought I was Leah and you're Avery. I guess so. Welcome to Prairie Center, where we believe, empower, and leave a legacy. Welcome back to PCTV Studios, where we are live from a Jack in the Box.
So after morning announcements, a typical day involves teachers providing direct instruction in a variety of different ways, as well as providing interventions and enrichment to our students. Students are engaged in numerous activities that make them think outside the box, while learning to work independently and as part of a team. Throughout the year, students are provided the opportunity to work on public speaking and being a leader, which we feel are both important skills that will help them be successful in life. In addition to all the ways that we engage the students in activities during the day, PC is involved in numerous charitable events in the community. Noah's Bandage Project is one in particular that I'd like to highlight, as it's near and dear to many in the PC community. And just a little plug, the Noah's Bandage Project is the week of September 18th. Prairie Center also has a wonderful relationship with our feeder schools, Olathe West and Mission Trail, who come and perform and volunteer on a regular basis. And we also love any opportunity we get to interact with important people in our community, such as the Olathe Police Department, Fire Department, Mayor Bacon, and our very own Dr. Yeager. And we know that we wouldn't be able to accomplish all that we have without the support that we receive from our parents and PTO, who regularly host events that bring our families together. Parents are welcome to come and volunteer in our lunchroom, classrooms, clubs, mystery readers, watchdogs. The list goes on and on. And at PC, we are blessed to have Journey Bible Church as our faith-based partner. From providing treats for staff, helping families in need, volunteering at events, to helping beautify our school, they are always there for us. And speaking of our staff, our third and final area that I wanted to highlight is our PC staff. Our art teacher, Lindsay Frack, put together a short video of some of the characters that we have at PC. I hope you enjoy.
And remember, boys and girls, at PC, character counts.
We sure do have a lot of characters at PC. Mr. Ryan, can you open my milk? Me too.
All right.
Can you tie my shoes?
Oh, Adrian, you know I would if I could.
I want to be a balloon artist. What the heck?
A hamster?
I interrupt this glow party to remind you it is Slam Day for Mr. H and Mr. Bohan. Woo!
You guys coming to happy hour? Billy's coming. Heck yeah. We'll be there. Awesome. Don't forget, 4 o'clock, happy hour. Billy's coming. Billy's coming? Billy, what are you doing? It's 4 o'clock. We got happy hour. Come on.
We love happy hour!
All right, so how do you measure success? To me, there are plenty of ways, but one way is this. Do staff members want their own children to go to the school that they work at? And as you can see in this photo, we have quite a few staff members that either have had children go through PC, currently have their children at PC, or soon will. Another way to measure success is if students and parents are happy. Above is just one example of an email that I recently received from a parent. Now, I'm not going to read the whole email, but I want to highlight this sentence. It reads, "My child comes home every day excited about the day he's had and can't wait to tell us about that." And as a parent, that's exactly what I want. And as a goal for our staff, we want the conversation at the dinner table to be about all the wonderful things that happen at Prairie Center. And this teacher is doing that. We also find it important to celebrate success because we know that engaged staff, students, and community tend to lead to great results. And at Prairie Center, we are excited to be able to share some of those great results with you. Prairie Center had the highest overall growth in the Olathe School District last year on the Kansas math and ELA assessments. And so I'm very proud of all the PC community on that. And finally, going back to our why. It's the kindergartners that you see coming in every year, but it's also these graduating seniors that you see come back to PC every year, that we provide them with the necessary tools to be successful in the next stage of life. And that's PC, so thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Board, are there any questions for Mr. Bohan? I have a question for you. Not so fast. What did the kids do or accomplish in order for you to dump slime on your head?
So that was a fun run. We met our goal for fun run, and that was the incentive that they had, the school-wide incentive.
Awesome.
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Veach, you are up, and you have to follow that.
I know. It'll be good.
Good evening. It's nice to see all of you again. I am Julie Veach, and I'm the Director of School Improvement and Assessments here within the district. And I want to take a moment just to give you a glimpse of our achievement data from this last school year. And so during tonight's presentation, we are going to dig a little bit deeper than we did last year, because my goal is to make sure that I can provide more clarity to you and more understanding around what the data means for us as our system, as well as how we use this data throughout the year. So just a reminder as to the students who make up our schools district, right? And so as you will see here, it's just a brief look at the racial breakdown that we have. Pretty much the same as it was last year. The only difference there was in movement is that students who identified as white, that population decreased by 1%, and our Hispanic population went up by 1%. When you're looking at the ELL breakdown of our community, again, this is one that continues to grow for us. And so this last school year, again, this is last year's demographic data. And so this last school year, we had approximately 13% of our students that received ELL services. And again, that is coming from all over the world, and they are coming here to Olathe to receive education from us. And I did note that we had over 80 different languages that are spoken within the district, so 80 other languages other than English that families consider their primary language. And then leading that off is Spanish, followed very closely by Berber and Amharic. Did I say that right? Amharic, sorry, my fault. And then when you look at students with disabilities, that is also an area, I know that we've discussed this many times throughout this last school year, but that is one that continues to grow for us. And so we are now, this last school year, as we wrapped up, we were sitting with 18% of our population identifies as being a student with a disability. And so that's up from 2% from the year prior. You know, when you combine our students that are ELL along with our students that have disabilities, like that's a big chunk of our student population, if you will, when you compare that to other districts. So the impact on that is we have to make sure that our teachers are equipped in order to know how to meet the needs of any kind of a learner that steps into our classroom. As we get rolling tonight, one of the things that I want to point out to you is that we have many different types of assessments that we look at. And so as you see here, we have, I'm going to briefly touch on 4 of those, dig a little bit deeper into 2 of the 4. But as a system, we continue to lean into all of these. And so I think the big thing to know is that our teachers pull this information from many different sources because we want this complete picture of what our kids can do, of who our kids are, what they can do, what that looks like for them as learners, how we need to adjust as we continue on throughout the school year. We would never rely on one point of data. And so everything you see here is stuff that we definitely lean into throughout our system. So the first one that I've highlighted is the math and reading screeners with FastBridge. I know you heard about this last year, but the big thing I want to remind you of is that, you know, we've adopted FastBridge. This is entering our 2nd school year of having adopted that system across the entire district. The thing about FastBridge, and you know, we use it for both the reading screener and the math screener, because for us, we want to know if a student has the potential of being at risk for struggling throughout the rest of their career, like that school year as well as in years to come. And so we use that as our screener so that we can identify early if a student might be at risk, because we want to know so we can quickly intervene, dig a little bit deeper, find out if they might need interventions or not. So that's a very important piece that we use to kick off the school year. That screener is given 3 times a year, so it's given in the fall. It'll be given again in December, and then we give it again in late spring. And that really is that idea that we want to have continuous eyes on how our students might be doing with just those basic skills that lay into both math and reading. The most important piece about that, though, is that it really is part of our instructional planning that we do with all of our students. And so our teachers, they actively grab that data and they really dig in. It's able to tell them if there's anything that's needed for their class as a whole, as well as anything that they might want to come back and boost for a single student. And so we really need the data in order to help us know that information. When we look at FastBridge, just a reminder of our students that participate in that. And so, obviously early reading is where we look at all students that are pre-K1. The auto reading is what we give to grades 2 through 8. This year we've added our 9th grade class to take the auto reading, and that helps us keep up with what we need to do for the state of Kansas and continuing to monitor how our students are going with their reading. Auto reading is the one that we look at for grades 2 through 5, and then CBM, which is that curriculum-based measure, that's on grades 1 through 5. And then you can see there for the math, the grades that we give for that. And that's the same as it was set up to be last year. We haven't changed any of that. The other thing that I think is huge for us is as our teachers have become accustomed to this, it is something that they have really leaned into and embraced as well. We've had lots of positive feedback, very appreciative of that data so they can quickly act on it and use it throughout their planning. So as we interpret FastBridge results, first of all, what you're seeing on the screen right now, it's just in general. This is no specific grade level, no specific building, but just in general, as teachers grab the information and they look at that, we want to know who is high risk for struggling, who might be at some risk for struggling, and then our students that we would consider on track. So as you look at that, the red is our students that are high, and obviously the gold is the sum, and the green is they're on track. And I know you can read a graph, but for those who can't see it in the back, I just wanted to be sure and point that out. So for us, as we continue on, and I described some of this, I'm going to start referring to at-risk categories. And I want you to keep in mind when I talk about at-risk, I'm really talking about the red and the yellow combined. Those are the ones that we would consider at-risk somewhere along the way, and we would jump in and do further diagnostics to make sure there's nothing that they might need from us as they continue with their education. So going back to that A reading that was there, A reading really, it's a test that is going to adapt to the student's ability. It includes questions that's related to all aspects of reading, when we look at all the reading skills that a student might have. The celebrations that we have from that, to step back before I get into the celebrations piece, just to understand as I'm moving through these, I'm going to start talking percentiles. And so if you're not familiar with that, we like to think in terms of if we were to take every school district in the nation and line them up in terms of the growth they made throughout the year, from the schools that made the least bit of growth to the schools that made the most growth, we would want to make sure that we at least hit that 50% mark and above it, which would mean that we outpaced the growth of at least half of the schools that were out there. And so, and that's the way that FastBridge is set up, so that we can see that and be able to get an idea of how we're growing. So when we celebrate, we want to know that, first of all, the average growth of all of our students was at the 48th percentile. So we're hovering right around that 50th percentile mark, which is great when you're considering thousands and thousands of districts from across the nation who are very similar to ours to very different from ours. We still want to know, how are we doing? The range of growth that we saw within our district ranged from the 42nd percentile to the 58th percentile. And so we had, again, even our lowest buildings, we were hovering closer to that 50th percentile mark, which was, again, great for us. The greatest average growth that we saw for students that were at risk, again, in that gold and red category was our grade 2, and they are the ones that hit that 58th percentile growth. So again, that is just phenomenal. We were so excited about that. And again, that was last year's second grade, so it's this year's third graders as they're jumping into their third grade year. An area that we know we want to focus on is our fifth graders, which would be this year's sixth grade. That's that class that hovered around the 42nd percentile. In a way, that wasn't as surprising to us, simply because they had yet to have that core 95% instruction available to them because it had not yet been adopted by the board. And so we're excited to see that class continue to grow. All of our schools are talking about the great results they're seeing from it. So we have confidence that that's going to come up fairly quickly. When we look at CBM reading, so that is going to tell us how our students are doing with fluency. The composite score that they give us talks about accuracy, so are they reading the words correctly, and it talks about rate. And so that's what makes up that composite score that we look at with the CBM reading. Again, we're talking in terms of percentile, so if we were to line up from the least amount of growth to the greatest, we want to hit at least that 50th percentile mark. So the average growth for all students who participated in this, that was the 46th percentile. So again, we hovered around that. When we pull out, just looking at the at-risk kids, and we look at the range of our average at-risk groups, we had a range in there from the 35th percentile all the way to the 56th percentile. So a lot of variance within that. So as you'll see in a moment, that's an area that, again, we want to make sure that we come back and address and close up. The greatest average growth for at-risk students, when we look at just our students who are at risk, the greatest growth was in that grade 2. And so again, just a huge celebration for them. And that, again, was last year's second grade class, so this year's third grade class. So we're excited to see that. We know, again, that sixth grade is an area, so last year sixth grade, this year seventh grade, is an area that we want to make sure that we continue to focus on, as they only show growth around that 35th percentile. So again, another class that didn't have that core 95% instruction that was going on, it hadn't been adopted yet, but they have been moving with that. So again, we expect that to be coming up for us, and teachers are excited to see the growth that's happening there. Another component of CBM reading is we also like to pull out just the fluency component. So just that idea of, is a student reading their words accurately, right? And so when we look at that fluency, the goal is to have a student who's at least 95% or higher when we have them read to us. We want to know, are they hitting those words? So when you look at this page, we're not talking that percentile rank again. We're just talking, as a student, how did you do? You know, the goal is always going to be, we want 100% accuracy. But for us, like anything above, our first goal with that is like to hit the 95% mark, knowing that we're striving for 100%. So when we look at all students across the grade levels, 2nd through 8th grade, the average accuracy for them was 98%, which is just amazing. Like, we absolutely want to make sure that we celebrate that. When we pull out the kids that were considered at risk, so across the system, any student that was in that gold or red range, when we look at their growth, that range for them, for just that group, was the 91st percentile to the 98th. So again, that is absolutely amazing. That is just like a huge celebration for us as a system again. The highest rate of accuracy, when we look at the students that were classified at risk, it was a three-way tie, if you will, between 5th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. All of them were at the 98% in accuracy. So, like, if I could have every 5th, 7th, and 8th grader in the district standing up here, oh my gosh, that'd be a lot of names for Rebecca to read, but it would be such a celebration. Like, they are doing so great. We also know that, we talked about the range is incredible. It's just so high. But we know that right below the 95th percent mark that we want is where grades 1, 2, and 3 sat, which makes absolute sense because they're still learning to read, right? When you look at this page as a whole, I think the big celebration for us is that it really tells us that the phonics instruction and the phonics interventions, that they're working. They're absolutely working. And so the students that need that intervention for accuracy, that is way down from where it was. which is giving us a chance now to go back in and continue to build the automaticity and to be able to push that and help our kids be able to read at a rate that really supports comprehension. So this was an exciting piece of data for us. I hope you all are celebrating with me as we look at that. Shifting gears to look at math. When we look at A-math, that is our assessment that it really adapts to the student ability as they take it, and it includes skill level questions that are related to math skills in all areas. And so again, the big celebrations for us, we're back to talking those percentiles. So now we're back to lining everybody up across the nation. And we as a district, we are at the 54th percentile. And so, which again is like a great celebration. We love that piece. We obviously want that higher, but after having been in this for 1 year, like we love the fact that we are doing better than half of everybody out there, right? And then when we go back and we pull out just the kids that are in the red and the gold range, the at-risk range, that the scores there fell between 46th and 57th percentile. And so we had, again, a little bit of variance in there, more than we would want, but everything is hovering at least close to that 50th mark as we continue to work on that and address it. The greatest average growth when we look at our kids that were identified as at risk, the greatest growth came from 5th grade, and they were at that 57th percentile mark. So huge celebration for those 5th graders. I know their 6th grade teachers this year are loving that. And then a focus area for us is to go back and really think through, our 3rd graders. And 4th grade teachers, they know that this is information that they absolutely used as they prepared for this school year, being able to get in there and look at their students and what they might need. But that was at the 46th percentile. So again, hovering close to that 50 mark where we want to at least be as we push forward. But still, lots of celebrations for us knowing that we have been in this 1 year and using the information and being able to screen our kids and get what they need. So going back to the chart that I had in the beginning, when you look at just our elementary schools, that is what you see represented here. And so you can see with each of these, I have the A reading and the A math. Those are the two big groups that we look at. The charts that you have in front of you, they represent over 5,700 students in our district, grades 2 through 5, who participated and were part of this screening group. In that we had right around 200 kids that moved out of the red in the fall of last year, and their scores improved. And so you can see that red band narrows for both the reading and the math. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking 5,700, like that's great. Like we will take that, and again, that's just knowing that we're 1 year into this and thinking about all the great growth we've had. The other fun piece when you look at that though is you see that the green grew. And so that is like the piece that also gets our teachers excited, because that's, again, hundreds of students had to move in that category just to know that we made that little bit of movement. And then the same applies for math as you look at that. And so again, our scores in the red went down and our scores in the green increased. So big celebrations for us in that regards as well. What's not reflected in anything you see is just the K1, anything that we had done with those students when it came to especially the A reading and the A math. We're really looking at foundational skills for them versus the skills that we would assess on grades 2 through 8. And so the thing about those is that the subtest that they give is different in the fall. It switches up a little bit in the winter, and then it's different again in the spring. So I can't easily give you a comparison of here's the way they were on a test in the fall and here's how they did on that same test in the spring, because it's just not there. Like the system isn't set up that way. It's set up to look at the skills they build throughout the year and ask the question if they're gaining those skills that they need. And then this here is what we see for middle school. And again, great celebrations. You can see with the A reading, students that were in the red and that were in the gold, those scores, the percent of students we had in those two categories that we consider at-risk categories, that went down, where the green grew. And so we were excited about that. And then the same thing happened for math. Overall, the middle school data represents about 6,100 students. I feel like I'm talking to, sorry, okay. So again, I just want to reiterate, last year being that first year, teachers are excited and they have embraced this and they are off and running with it. So that is fun to see. They've already been checking out the data for this school year and comparing and knowing where their kids are, because they absolutely hit the ground running. They did not wait to start with interventions because they had information from the spring and they could plug things right in and be ready to start supporting students immediately as we kicked off this fall. All right, switching gears. The next piece that we always look at when we talk about all the assessment pieces that are out there is the formative assessments that we have. And so those really are classroom-based, and they provide teachers with ongoing checks for understanding as they go through whatever their lesson, whatever their unit is, knowing the standards that are out there for them. Formative assessments can happen multiple times in a class period. And then it can also be a common formative assessment they might do. But it's that whole idea that we are constantly gathering feedback and not waiting till the end of a unit to know, is a student understanding? We're not waiting until the end of a school year to see, has a student grasped the concepts for this curriculum throughout the entire year? Teachers are constantly assessing that. And again, there's a plethora of ways that they do that. It's almost endless. But it's just that constant eyes on, knowing, asking the checking questions and figuring out where their students are. And then we look at the predictive interim assessments. So right now, this assessment, it is optional for our teachers. But teachers are encouraged to do it. It's given 3 times a year, and it's through the KITE assessment system with the state of Kansas. So KITE is the group that does that for them. And it really provides a systemic measure of where students are in their learning throughout the school year and how that progresses. And so as we've gone, there was a point where that was more cumbersome and took longer than we needed to. Since then, the state's come in and they've redone a lot of that. And so it's not the process it used to be. And so right now we have about half of our schools in our district that have signed up and they want to participate and do the predictive interims. And so we're excited for them to start that. And again, it's just one more point that they can dig in there and get some good information to tell them just overall where their students might be and if there are any key points that they're missing that they need to go back and strengthen. And then finally, I want us to take a look at the summative assessments that we have, which is the KITE system. And so as you know, that's given every year with math, ELA, and science. The social studies piece for that, as we'll talk in a moment, is given as part of the curriculum base, but it's also considered part of the state assessment. And truly, it's just an indicator, again, of what students have achieved throughout the whole year. So who participates in those? I think this is a very important piece for us to understand as we look at that data. So you can see there that in reading, we have grades 3 through 8, and then they test again in 10th grade. Math is the same, grades 3 through 8, they test again in 10th grade. Science, they take their assessment in 5th grade, in 8th grade, and 11th grade. I mean, it's pretty interesting with that because if a student, they can take biology their freshman year and not take another science class until their 11th grade year, or they can take it, ninth, like it just varies. And the type of science class they take after biology, that also varies. But the science assessment is just like, it is what it is. And so we always follow that carefully to see what that shows us. So it's always kind of an interesting piece for us. And then as I talked about, the social studies assessment, that is built into the class, part of what they do just as a regular piece of their curriculum. And that, again, we look at that for grades 4th grade, 7th grade, and 11th grade. When they look at that social studies piece, if any of you have students that might argue, children at home who might argue with you, you'll appreciate the fact that within that social studies, they are asked to make a claim about something, to provide the evidence, and then provide their reasoning as to why they think they're correct. So if any of you need to practice with your kids at home, that's a perfect way to jump out there and ask them if they can do those things, or watch for those things as they're talking to you. So it's also important for us to understand what the ELL participation looks like in regards to state assessments. We talked earlier about how that continues to grow for us, our students who receive those services. And so regardless of the entry date into the country, ELL students participate in the math and the science assessments their first year here. Like no matter what, they participate their first year here. So, and I think it's important to call out, it's not their first a year or the first time in Olathe, but it's when they entered the country. They take it that first year. And then after 1 year in the country, students are identified as ELL. They participate in the English language arts assessment. So again, it doesn't matter when they enter it, as long if they've been in the country at least 1 year, they participate in that. So we have students that are still learning that English language that are also participating in the state assessments. And then I think it's also important for us to acknowledge that students that are ELL, they also have to take what's called the KELPA, which is the Kansas English Language Proficiency Assessment. And so we, keeping in mind, we have about 3,000 students that have to do both the KELPA and the state assessments. And so that's just like a big load for them. And they're both, it's amazing to watch how hard they try on that, because they absolutely want to be able to demonstrate that they're getting that comprehension of the English language and that they know their curriculum as they move forward.
Dr. Veach, just to clarify, are any
Yes.
of those tests available in another language besides English?
No, it's in English.
Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, regardless of what their native language is, they're tested in English. So when we look at the state performance level, this gets very, I think is a key point that I want to call out for us. So we have to understand our system. We have to understand what that looks like as we lean into what the state's identified for us. So it is different than what you might see from other states across the nation. The federal government wants us to use 5 levels across the nation. And within that, they say that the bottom 2 levels should be considered as below proficient. However, the state of Kansas looks at that differently. And so I can tell you, as a member of the Assessment Advisory Council, this past year we spent time and we looked at every single state in the nation, and we looked at how did they band their scores and what do they use. We saw everything from states that had 6 levels all the way to states that only had 3 levels. And everybody described it differently. So we really had to come back and talk about, okay, so what is that going to look like in the state of Kansas? So they decided as a state that they were going to stick with 4 levels. And there's a plethora of reasons that they did that. Again, we just advised and they made the final decision on that. But I know that during that conversation, one of the things that we really stressed and talked about was this desire to have a consistency for our families across the state. We felt that they were used to the 4 levels. We've been talking the 4 levels for so long now, and we felt that if we were going to change that, it felt like we were trying to hide something or, making it confusing. So we wanted to stick with the 4 bands that were there, and that's ultimately what the state had landed on. So when you look at the state of Kansas information, it can become confusing because oftentimes I think people think of the federal piece and how there should be 5 bands and the lowest 2 means something, below proficient, but we have to, again, make sure that we're in the right frame of reference of no, we're talking 4 levels and this is what it looks like for us. When you look at this, you can see that it's all about the idea of what's the student's ability to understand and use the skills and knowledge that they need for post-secondary success. That can mean college, that can mean a trade school. That can mean a wide variety of things. So the whole idea is, are the students getting the skills that they need to be successful after they leave our system? And when you, again, look at levels 2, 3, and 4, we look at those as being basic, effective, and excellent. All 3 of those are considered that they are set up for post-secondary success. The top 2 levels, level 3 and level 4, that's what you would consider as college and career ready. And again, I think the most important thing for us is knowing that as we examine everything across tonight, that depending on the grade level and on the test, the cut scores that get you into a band continually change. So for example, a 6th grader might need a score of 277 to be at level 2 in ELA, whereas an 8th grader only needs a score of 265. And so there are different tests. They're looking for different things, and different groups of people set that. So scores don't mean the same thing by grade level, by content area. So we have to kind of keep that in the back of our minds as well. So as we go to look at the rest of this CAPS information, I want to be able to help us visualize this. So you can see up here we've laid out the bands 1 through 4 with what that would mean in terms of their preparations and having grasping those concepts, skills, and knowledge that's there. And again, just laying out that anybody in 2, 3, and 4, they're positioned for that post-secondary success. So the rest of the night, keep that in the back of your mind. And then I also wanted to point out that this is how college and career readiness lays into that. So again, the same information we covered, just a way to help us visualize that information. So if we take this now and we lay it to the district results, you will see that when we look at the English language arts results for the state assessment, that we're talking again, grades 3 through 8 and grade 10 are reflected in this data. So level 1 up there, that from that graph I just showed you, that visual I just showed you, when we talk about level 1 and that changes there, that's that orange section of that graph, right? And so it says right now that all students scored in level 1. Like for all students, 25% of them scored in level 1. So just doing the simple math, 100 minus 25 means that we had 75% of our students that scored in level 2, 3, and 4. So, which is great, right? So we had 75% of them that were positioned for that post-secondary success. And then I think the other important thing to remember is that as students take this test, so remember all the different students that are coming to the table, if you will, to take the test, they are asked to read and answer questions about literary passages. They're asked to look at informational text. They're asked to look at writing samples. They're asked to demonstrate knowledge and skills related to reading and writing, and they do that by either selecting the right answers and then sorting some answers. There could be some matching. They may be asked to label different types of information, and they may ask to order some different information that's out there. As you continue on through the graph, you'll notice that at ELL, there's that 70%, and that falls to be the same as the state that's there. And again, you see that ELL, we only had 6% of them that were that CCR, that college and career ready. We would expect that to be low. You know, it looks low, but we have to keep in mind that as students grow and they master CALPA and they do great on it, then that ELL tag starts to fall away. And so they are no longer really considered ELL because they've mastered that CALPA, right? And so I've highlighted on this graph for you just to give you an easy frame of reference. Anything in green is good. So when we look at level 1 and we talk about change, we want that to be a -1. That tells us we had kids move out of level 1, which is great. And so you can see the green boxes we have there for that. And then when we look at CCR, which is that college and career ready, again, the levels 3 and 4 that were on the state assessments, we want that to be a positive number. We want that to be green, which tells us that students moved into those top 2 categories. And so that was great for us. A moment to check that out. And then continuing on through student groups, we also look at our students that are considered low SES. And again, that's a hard one for us because we don't know if a family is considered to be low SES or not unless they tell us that. And so we may have some students that we're missing when we look at this information. But still, just looking at the students that identified that way versus those who didn't, you can see what those percentages are. Again, the green bands are great. We want to have that.
Mr. President, may I just ask a question to define SES and F/R in English? There's a lot of acronyms. What does SES stand for?
Socioeconomic status. Yeah, so students
And
or
non-F
families that
are?
might be struggling
Right.
for whatever reason.
And non-F/R?
They are students who do not receive free or reduced lunches. And that's typically a tag that, or a student that is, their family falls into that low SES category.
They're closed.
Yeah, so we know that they might apply for free and reduced lunch. So that's just the way the state teases that information out, which is we still want to keep an eye on it, but we can't take that as like 100% that we absolutely know.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then again, when we start looking at our students from different ethnic backgrounds, we want to keep our eye on that as well. And so, you know, again, anything in green is positive for us. We love having that up there. And, you know, not to say that we ignore anything up there that's NC, meaning no change, because we absolutely take that as a challenge. Like, we want to make sure that we continue to move the needle for all of our kids. And then I threw in here just for you to look at. I don't want to go over it in great detail, but just to have a quick frame of reference of how the district compares to the state when we're looking at performance. They break it down for us by grade level. You can see the districts in green and the states in blue. And again, we talk about it all the time, but it's nice to see the visual that we do outperform the state in all those categories. And then we're going to switch gears and look at some math. So remembering with math that students are asked to answer computation questions and questions about any data that's presented to them. And that data can come in the form of word problems, equations, graphs, tables, diagrams. They're asked to show what they know by selecting and providing correct answers, sorting or ordering items, creating graphs, labeling pictures. So just a wide variety that's there. Again, I would remind you that our ELL students, regardless of their entry into the country, they are taking this test in English. And so that's, I think, just a big piece for us to note. Again, the boxes in green are what we want to see. And while we aren't happy about the boxes that aren't in green, like it still is outperforming the state. And I know we sometimes get tired of hearing that, but it's like we need to look and we always want to know we're outpacing there, and then we continue to set those goals for ourselves of knowing, you know, how we can outpace ourselves from one year to the next. Again, looking at, you know, this is grades 3 through 8 and grade 10 when we look at student groups with the low socioeconomic status versus those who aren't. Again, great growth for all those groups. And then finally, when we look at ethnicity. So definitely some places that we want to target and improve, but I think overall, like, there's just a lot of celebration. And when you go back, and the first thing for us to do is be able to use those screeners, use that formative assessment data that we have, and let teachers get in here and really start plugging in and going. So they have become extremely proficient at doing that, and they have great things in place, like I said, even from the beginning of the school year. Again, looking at how we compare to the state. I know, once again, we get sometimes tired of hearing that, but the reality is that we do continue to do great things there, but it is not something that we rest with. We want to continue to improve that. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, and we're going to talk about the district ACT data that's out there. So I wanted to provide for you, as you can see up here, we have the national scores from 2022, and then we have how our district did for 2022, and then how our district did for 2023. Do not have yet the national scores for 2023 to know what that comparison is. But when you look at this data, if you'll remember, I talked about we have to really understand what's in front of us. And so I think that especially holds true when you look at the ACT results that are out there. So when you look at this, and if I were to go on to the ACT, which I did, go on and I start digging through, seeing how everybody else compare, when I can look at states, and then give me some of that. You know, if I were to look at the state of Maine, their average score is 25.1. And if I were to look at the state of California, their average score is 26.5. And it's like, it makes you so angry. And then I look at the participation rate. And the state of Kansas has a 70% participation rate. The state of Maine has 2% of their students who participate in the ACTs. And the state of California has 4% of their kids that participate in the ACTs. So the larger that number is that participate, we encourage all of our students to participate. We want them out there and going for that scholarship money and being able to know what doors and opportunities are out there for them, right? And so we have this really large participation rate. The state, or the school district of Olathe, we mirror the state participation rate. So we're also at 70%. That ranges from some buildings hover in, the low 60s, where other buildings are up in the 90s. And so, but it really is all about wanting our students to not have doors closed to them, not have opportunities kept from them. And so we ask everybody to participate. But again, I think that's very critical. When you start talking about how do we compare to other states, you always have to ask how many students are making up that number, right? Because it's very, very misleading when you're just comparing 2% that test versus 70% that test.
Mr. President, could I ask a
Yes, ma'am.
how do we compare across other districts in Kansas?
That part I don't know because they haven't let me, like I haven't been able to get in and dig there. Like it's just not information I have. I can certainly reach out to other districts and ask what theirs is. But yeah, when we go in, they only let me access Olathe data. So.
And the state doesn't track that?
They may,
Doesn't
but
track
it's not
that.
something that I can
That you have
access
access to.
yeah. But I can certainly find that for you, Dr. Yurkovich. And so after we have the ACT scores, we always want to know, well, how does it relate to, how does our CAP and our ACT, how does that relate? Is there any connection there? And so the state started doing some pieces a couple of years ago. We're using the CAP scores from 8th grade and 10th grade. They felt that we can predict how a student might perform on the ACT in regards to English language arts, reading, and math. I think, the most important thing to know is that it's talking about how they may perform, and that ACT will be the first to tell you that it's based upon many different factors can influence a student's scores. And so that ranges everywhere from the courses they may have taken previously, to any previous exposure they might have had to testing format, to what they have for breakfast and if they got a good night's sleep, right? So lots of things can impact what this looks like. But in general, we're gonna go through and kind of dissect that a little bit. So you'll recognize this. This is what we put up for CAP. So if we start with this as our foundation, there are gonna be 3 layers that we look at tonight. And so the first one is if we take across the top and if we place the CAP cut scores on here. And so again, remembering that each grade level and each test, those cut scores are going to be different, right? But if we start laying these across what we have right here, and then we want to add in, talking about the reading portion, we want to add in the ACT cut scores. And so you can see what they say their cut scores would be as we look at that. I think the key to remember is that as we come in now, we're going to look at this college and career readiness benchmark they have out there. So according to ACT, in a moment when we look at where the delta falls within that graphic, that really means that if a student can achieve that mark on the ACT, they feel that there's a 50% chance that they will get a B or better in an entry-level college course. So as we come back to the reading portion, looking at 8th grade, you can see where they say, oh, if a student gets at least a 22. Well, that compares, that's still what we would consider level 2 scores. And they're saying a kid's scores there at the high end of level 2, they're still college and career ready, right? That they have that 50% chance of being able to go to college and get at least a B in their courses. And then again, when we look at the English language arts predictor, that even shifts more down into what we would have for our level 2 learning. And so they consider that 18 is the score that you want to have on the ACTs. Well, that still falls for us in that level 2 category. When you look at 10th grade reading, it's going to be very reflective of what we saw for 8th grade. Again, they lay in that delta of a 22 is the score that they say, man, if kids can hit at least a 22, we know that they're going to have this level of success in college. But again, that falls right into our level 2 of where we're looking. And then finally, again, when you look at the ACT, the English language arts predictor that's up there. Again, they shift that back down to an 18, which almost lays right in the middle of our level 2 band. And then shifting to math, when we look at 8th grade math and the ACT math predictors, they're saying the 22 is what you want to have. And for us, there's a range they give, and so the middle of that range is the 22, but that range for us would fall high level 2s. Are definitely included in that range as they look on. There is no 10th grade data, so they don't have that yet, simply because at the time they calibrated this, it was the year that we did not have 10th grade math assessments. So I know that they're in the process of going back and updating that for us. So I'm hoping that a year from now, as I stand before you, I can have that information for you as well. So after all of that information, right? Well, very quickly, what's working well for us? So I think the three main things that we would say that's working well for us is that we have this district-wide framework for MTSS, which is that multi-tiered system of supports. That's that whole process that says, how do we get in and support a student, whether they are struggling, whether they're just some fractional skills they may be missing, just some splinter skills here and there, or it's a student who, you know what, they're doing great, but they've kind of flatlined and we want to keep boosting them up so that they can continue to achieve high, and we know that we're meeting their needs as a learner. And so I think the big thing for us is that MTSS, it definitely provides that consistency and fidelity that we want for all students across all grade levels. Another thing we look at is that we consider this working roles, again, is the implementation of interventions district-wide. So that was a big lift last year as we layered math right there beside that reading, and just watching schools embrace that and go, like, that has been absolutely phenomenal and fun to watch. And then, of course, our positive behavior intervention supports, really giving those students that framework they need to manage themselves and be in their environments and help them with any skills that they might need in regards to the social emotional component of their day so that they can be in the classroom and learning with their other friends and students, right? But on our radar, I would tell you, learning services as a whole, these are the questions that we continue to ask ourselves all the time. And that is, how are we using Tier 1 instruction to provide a guaranteed and viable curriculum for all students? We want to know that no matter what building you're in, that you have that opportunity to have the same instruction, the same curriculum, and you are doing great. And so our teachers work very hard for that, but that's always at the forefront of our minds. And then the second one is, how are we defining high quality instruction and selecting our strategies? We've worked very hard with that throughout this past year. Kelly Tynes and her team, they have done a great job of really making that easy access for teachers and helping teachers identify what's working, what's not working. How do I know I picked the right strategy? How do I know it's time to change? And then finally, how are we building the efficacy of our teachers? And so that's the big piece there, is, you know, helping them have that confidence and that success that they're out there leading the way and they know what they're doing for their kids all the time. Again, this is a great piece that's out there, but for us, it's like we want that efficacy as a system, and we don't want teachers to feel like they're working in a silo and trying to do things on their own. And so we've worked hard to build that for them. But ultimately, I would tell you that the work is never really done. So it's something we always come back to. And finally, I would end tonight just reminding everybody that our site council is coming up here at the end of September. And there are so many things for us to celebrate as a district. Like, we could go on and on and on. We identified very quickly, sitting at the table, 14 different sessions that is, somebody can choose to step into that night. People get a chance to pick 3 out of the 14, definitely, that they can go to, but we are just really highlighting some fantastic work that's out there that's helping all of our kids be successful, regardless of what they bring to the table as a learner every single day. So, at that note, I think that only took about, 10 minutes? So thank you very much for hanging in there. And if anyone has a score update, I'd appreciate it. No, just kidding. Just kidding. But anything I can clarify or address for you?
I have just a few questions. I think they're easy. I know kickoff's 1 minute, so I'll go really fast. I don't think we're going to make it.
I tried.
No, we're good. So a question about students who fall into more than one of those categories, such as ethnicity or disability. Is there a decision made on which outweighs the other, or are they put in both?
No, they absolutely are represented in multiple categories as they come across. And so because of that, it's important for our buildings to recognize and know, you know, how are we supporting the different components of any learner. I think the reality is when you look at our district, I feel, are such a reflection of society as a whole. And so we would never, you know, myself included, like, I would never be just one piece of that, right? And I think almost all of us can say that for whatever reason. And so we just want to make sure that within our buildings, are there specific things we want to do to help our students that are acquiring, you know, a new language? Are there specific things that we know if a family, for example, might be struggling and they're considered that low SES, you know, we have to keep that in our minds too. Maybe they don't have the easy access to internet, or they aren't able to have somebody there right away, you know, who can read to their kid when they get home or help them, you know, read to them later. So we would look for those opportunities all the time throughout the day so that we can come in and provide some of that additional support. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that with any of our families, between the foundation and Heather Schoonover with community development. Like, they're helping us address all the problems from all the different angles for any student. So, you know, the burden of it all doesn't lay just on the teacher, like, as a system, and you'll hear about some of that here at the site council too. So, sorry, I had to get in a little additional plug as
No,
as I
I
answered your
love
question.
that.
Yeah.
You were headed right where my brain was going, so I really appreciate that. Does it come from the state that we have to test our ELL kiddos within that short time frame?
It does, yes.
That's almost just heartbreaking. Can you tell me how you test a kiddo who has been here for a minute with integrity, where they can still feel good about the educational system and the journey they're going to go on, which is going to be rich and wonderful and powerful for their lives, but we start in a space of, I'm sure it does not feel good to the student.
Exactly. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention Mike Flinthrope, you know, our director of language acquisition, and the way he works with all of our ELL teachers, who are just amazing, and they know how to do that. Ultimately, when you look at that for our students that are doing both the CELPA and the CAP, we consider the CELPA to be more high stakes for them, because that really is about, do they have that acquisition piece they need?
It almost would make sense if the CELPA did first and we give them more time and then do the other testing, but that's not how it goes.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And so there are lots of those conversations, and sometimes it's just, you know, try your best. Because, you know, they still have the exact same protocols, the exact same ethics and security guidelines as any other student. We can't answer additional questions for them. We can't read that aloud. So it really is that whole idea of helping them understand, what does this test mean to you? And, you know, all along we've been teaching them strategies to help. And so just reminding them of that, and just, you know, at the end of the day, there's that conversation too of, you are more than just one point of data, right?
Right.
And so for any student.
all our kids, yeah.
Exactly. And that's why even our teachers, we remind ourselves, our kids are made up more than just one data point. We have to be looking at multiple facets of how we're supporting our kids.
Right.
I would say too, you know, the power of our teachers knowing their individual students is really important, because for some of our students, just getting through the test is a major success. I mean, that's the reality of it. Where we have other students who, you know, getting a level 4 is the major success of the assessment. But our teachers do a great job, I think, of lessening the impact and the anxiety when students who likely don't have, they may have the skill, they don't have the language capacity to sit down and take the assessment, of helping with that. The other thing that you know, we work through as a system as well is we have a good number of school kids in our school system, and this is not unique to Olathe, who are not literate in their native language. So, you know, we're going in and we're trying to fill in learning gaps, but also teach language at the same time. And those are complex situations where we can never lose sight of the kiddo that's sitting right in front of us, and how we help make them feel in terms of a student as they go through our system.
Well, Dr. Vitt, this is just rich and such good data. I to present it in this way that is also so applicable, I'm so thankful. So
thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Beach. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Connell?
Yes, we have a question. So thank you for all that data.
You bet.
Because it's new and different, it is hard to look at last year's data and do it a comparison. But you were also brand new at that point in time, so this gives you a full year of running data of what's valuable and important. I had a couple questions. So do any of these test structures that you work with, do they allow auditory questions and answers versus just straight up reading and visual?
Sure. So when you look at FastBridge for both the math and the reading, there are components on that are auditory, but then there are other pieces of that, segments of that are not. Like the directions might be read, but then they just complete the task. You know, once they know what to do, then they follow the screen and continue on. With the state assessment, there is a very rigorous threshold, if you will, on whether a student can have the questions read to them or even the answer choices read to them, versus if a student needs a little bit more read to them. And so we have very, very few of our students, even with the district this size, very few that would qualify to have a full test read to them. I mean, it really is a significant threshold that's out there, and the state has very specific guidelines and very specific information we have to present to them, and then they make the decision on if a student can have that level of reading to them. at the highest level, right? And so, but that mid-level that's in there, again, they're very specific about the qualifications to be able to have that. And it's a piece that we have to show across various courses that that's actually something that is needed, and what their ability to be able to grasp the question is if they didn't have that. But again, they lay that criteria out there, and then we have to enter that and go from there. So it's a limited number of them.
And it
as
would go the other way if they have a hearing deficit.
If they have a
would be
hearing
given
deficit,
visual.
yes. No, if they
Okay.
have a hearing deficit, that's totally different.
'Cause that goes the other
Yeah.
way.
If they have a hearing deficit, that is absolutely different. That is part of that disability. If they have a hearing deficit, we may opt to use something different than FastBridge in order to be able to get that same kind of information. The same if a student has a visual impairment, that there wouldn't be good for them to take FastBridge on a screen. For whatever reason, we can't provide that way. We would also have explore different options. That team would talk about how can we get some of the same information to know if a student's at risk or not. Because again, that FastBridge is such a screener. It's just a screener that helps us keep track of if a kid's maintaining a level that we need.
And since John FastBridge, I have another question about that.
Sure.
You mentioned that we FastBridge about 3 times a year, right? Which is when we report the data, is that typically the late spring data?
It is. We had to report the spring data.
Okay, great. One of the challenges with FastBridge and in a comparative to a national number structure is not everybody's on FastBridge. Just as we're on FastBridge, we used to be on maps, right?
MAP.
Map. So even then, apples to oranges from 4 years ago to today would be harder challenge to do, let alone compare us to another state that might be using yet a different testing structure. Would that be fair?
It would be. And the reality is that even across the state of Kansas, not everybody uses FastBridge.
Right. So we're
Yeah. So every district across the nation has the latitude of choosing what they need.
Oranges, apples, crab apples. It is hard to be really finite, but that would be true to be finite that how we compare against District A or B or C, these are approximations, right? But and that's
Yeah,
why you
so
have those four
when they look
categories
at
as
everybody
such.
who's taken the test, they can give us those comparisons.
Right.
But they know that it isn't, not everybody in the nation's using their test.
Right.
And so that piece is out there.
And then it's the 4 categories because maps or someone else, they're still 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Any district could report their information against that. Is that how it works?
No, so the state assessments is the 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Oh, the state,
that
okay, so that's just about
the
their
state collects.
assessments,
And the other thing I would say too is in order for us to use any assessment like FastBridge or MAP or any of the other things that are available for school systems, in order for them to give us a national percentile like 50 or 58, they have to have a statistically significant group that takes the test, that there is a reliability factor with that. So you're right in terms of saying that, it's not everybody in the nation, but in terms of FastBridge or MAP or any of those, in order for them to give us a percentile where we rank nationally, they have to have a statistically significant group and wide enough to give us that information.
On slide 42, on what's working well, MTSS implementation, could you help me better understand how does PBIS measure and how it's measured effectiveness in reading or math scores? How are we using that to measure PBIS?
Probably the biggest example I can give you, there are many, but the top one out there is that when if a student is having any kind of situation that prevents them from being in the classroom, they are missing that direct instruction. And that's the biggest thing about PBIS is how are we reinforcing so that we have a supportive school, that all of our kids have that sense of belonging, so that when they're in that classroom, they feel like they're in a secure, safe environment and they can be learning, and that we are able to have them for the maximum of time within that classroom. And that's one of the key questions we always ask is, are they accessing the curriculum at a high rate? And so that's just a piece that's out there for the PBIS. And so if we have a student that for whatever reason is struggling, we're going to quickly bring together the experts, if you will, look at that, come up with a plan. If it's a check-in, check-out, or something other that they might deem is appropriate to help that student to be able to, again, be in the classroom the maximum amount of time, feel safe and secure while they're in there, then they brainstorm that for that individual kid so they can get that in place, and then know, is that student able to be in that room, right?
Classroom time, curriculum time increases their learning time, which increases their opportunity.
Anytime you're out of the room.
Which goes to
then-
the conversation I think someone else had a couple months ago about attendance, right? Getting kids to class, getting kids to school. It's like, the more, Kansas is suffering at a huge deficit of kids going to school at all, right? Showing up for their whole day. And that is something that we really want to reiterate, is the scores do better, the kids do better when they're in classroom, right? On slide 42, and I had a question, maybe it was just a graphic, I was reading it. It was in the Math 8 ACT Math Predictor. It says ACT reading scores 1 through 18, but then 22.
Oh, that's my fault. As many times as I proofread this slide,
I'm sorry,
that should have
okay.
been ACT math scores, not reading, so thank you for
It
catching
could have been a
that.
translation, I didn't know.
Nope, the top is correct, that little bitty band down below is not, so that's my fault.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, shoot, I was so hoping that we're, darn it.
That's what you get for having 45 slides.
Well,
Next time I'm gonna ask you to proofread it for me, Mr. Connell.
well, I mean, with all the reading that is in math
Yeah.
these days.
You
right?
bet.
Reading the instructions, self-reading
bet.
the information, reading, the word, the word problems that we all hated. as kids.
Dr. Reeves, you made note of that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, thank you. He was my proofreader. No, just kidding. Many of us had eyes on it. We didn't catch that, so my fault.
So I have a question on
Yes.
slide 37. You mentioned that level 2 was equal to a B in a college, or better in an entry-level college level course on the ACT. So it was the one with the big triangle.
No.
It says ACT college readiness benchmark. According to ACT, if a student achieves a score, there's a 50% chance they'll be able to get a B. And then the next slide, it says a score of 22, reading on the ACT, would be the equivalency of their ability to get a B. But it's in category 2, and college and career readiness are typically categories 3 and 4. And so I'm kind of curious how that correlates. Because we do offer college level classes in Olathe high schools.
You bet.
And not all the kids are even taking that, let alone trigonometry or calculus or the higher level maths as it is.
You bet.
So is this a state number, or are these our numbers?
This is when they did the study and they worked with ACT, and they did the comparison of CAP would equal what on an ACT, right? But regardless, ACT has always identified, if you can score where the delta is in the blue, then we know you have that 50% chance of getting a B. Yeah, you could.
Whether you do it or not, it's different, but you could do the work.
Exactly,
Right.
you could. And so that's what that blue delta reflects all the way through there, is the score that ACT identified as saying, here's the score that we think you need on math, that we think you need on reading, that we think you need on the language arts portion.
Yeah.
And so our whole point of laying it out like this is to be able to show that ACT identified that, and it still falls within our level 2. So, just that whole, the idea of we don't have 5 categories. We only focus on 4, but even within then, 2 doesn't mean that you're failing. It doesn't mean, no, absolutely not. So that 2, 3, and 4, like they're good. We'll take that.
And it's worthy to note too, the state established the 4 bands before they had ACT correlation. So students had to take the assessment for a number of years so they could see the longitudinal growth of the students. Once they took the ACT, and then they could back down, how did they do in 10th grade? How did they do in 8th grade? So the 4 bands were created before they had the correlation for the ACT, if that makes sense, because students had to take the test for a number of years so they could make that correlation.
The slides prototypically at 3 and 4, those are kids that are going to do fine at K-State, Wichita State, Johnson County Community College as pretty much a well-done group. The basic
Well, other
group, the 2
factors
group has
considered,
other
right?
things. They might have to work a
Yeah.
little harder, might need to get some
Yeah.
help, right? First level classes.
I'll be honest, my dad got the letter saying, dear sir, you need to get your daughter to class. So there are other things that impact if a student's going to be successful or not. So
I'm good with that.
I'll confess that right up front. If my family's watching, they know it. So
And I just want to double check, in the growth language you used early on, it was given where kids were and the growth that they showed
over 1 school year.
One school year, given every other school in the country and their growth that they showed, how do we rank in those core cohorts generally? Is that correct? So it's really when we when our kids did better, or let's say they were in the 50th percentile, that means for all of our kids of those age taking these tests and growing in it, they grew at least 50% as well as any other. And that there were other states
Other districts.
Other districts were farther behind, and there were some that were doing better.
Yes.
So it wasn't really about their raw score. It was our
that comparative growth. How did we compare to the growth somebody else might have?
Teachers to take them where they were and sometimes drag them, pull them, push them, educate them further along, right?
Yes.
And I would expect that that's probably a benchmark we're going to be looking at each of the next successive 2 or 3, 4 years to see, are we continually growing? You mentioned heavily about phonics being a huge factor in the 95 percentile in the last year. First year of really, and not fully even loaded out, being a huge element. And I wanted to call out that at a lot of the schools, they had music teachers doing that work. They had PE teachers doing some of that work because some of the kids were behind in years past. We had I know at your school, Dr. Waters, you had
it's all hands on deck.
All hands on deck. If everyone was available and there were kids that needed help or interventions, that's really an important function of the intervention model. And Fastbridge catching them sooner, earlier, right?
So for us as a district, we'll continue to follow that cohort. So the 4th graders this year will follow that group into 5th grade, into 6th grade, into 7th grade to know that their skills are continuing to grow every year, rather than comparing this year's 4th graders to next year's 4th graders. Like, we want to know that group of kids, how are they growing every successive year?
Thank you so much. I know there's a gajillion pieces of data and you had to figure out how to fit it somewhere, but thank you for the information.
You bet. You bet.
Board members, any other questions?
Thank you. Just a quick thank you to Julie for working on this. You know, you probably just received the most robust board data presentation maybe in the history of the school district, actually.
Sorry, Jim.
But you know, a couple of things that I think are, Jim, do you want a minute? A couple of things that I think are worth mentioning. You know, as Julie was talking about state assessments, you know, there's some complexities involved in that are in some ways like school finance in the state of Kansas, that, you know, there's a lot of different ways to look at the data and what have you. But the thing that Julie said so many times that I'm really proud of is that our focus has to be on the individual kiddos and our teachers that are working with individual kiddos and meeting their needs in relation to growth, but also just supporting them in their academic entirety. But I just wanted to thank you, Julie, for all the work to put that together. And she represented tonight, obviously, the work of many of our staff members. And also, just one of the things that got me fired up as I looked at the data with Julie that I just wanted to mention, our highest scores on Fastbridge were in 2nd grade, which is so cool as you think about how important it is that kids be reading in 3rd grade and moving forward there. You know, for our students to be, you know, better than 57, you know, of the school well, I don't even know how I'm saying it right. You know, if there was 100 of them, they would be better than 57 of the school districts as 2nd graders, just in terms of the percentiles. But I think it's really exciting to see that, and also the focus on our early emerging readers and the work we're doing there.
And I don't know if I pointed out or not, but the significance with 2nd grade is 2nd grade, by the end of 2nd grade, like, they should be transitioning from learning to read to reading to learn as they enter 3rd grade. So that's why that is such critical data for us as well.
Well,
it's just amazing.
They were also COVID kindergartners.
That's true.
Yes.
They
I wasn't going to bring up that word.
Well, you talk about those other factors that influence. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to public comments 5.01. Mrs. Steele?
At each regular board meeting, the Board of Education reserves limited time for individuals wishing to address the board. We request that individual speakers limit their comments to 3 minutes. The clerk will monitor the time and notify the speaker when the 3-minute time limit has expired. Please direct your comments to the entire board. If a response is appropriate, the president will respond or refer to another individual. In an effort to respect privacy, we ask that speakers refrain from discussing personal complaints involving individual staff members or students. Those speaking are advised that public comments are videotape recorded for broadcast on the district's educational access channel, and audio tape recorded as a matter of public record. Individuals addressing the board should come to the podium at the front of the room and state your name and address.
Megan Briggs.
Good evening, Board of Education. My name is Megan Bricks, and I am an elementary music teacher here in Olathe. We have completed about 3.5 weeks of school, and it has truly been an amazing time. Over the course of these 3.5 weeks, I've been able to welcome students back to the building from their summer breaks, and I've gotten to meet new faces who we are so glad they joined our school community. As a staff, we have put in the work to ensure that our core instruction is being explicitly taught, and we have put in the time to prepare for our intervention systems. We are a team, and we all play a vital role in the community of our school. As the music teacher, I sometimes play different roles. Each day I am the music teacher. Some days I am the choir teacher. Some days I am the sound system expertise, according to my principal. Some days I am an extra hand in the classroom to support student needs. But every day I am Megan Bricks. I am a person. Every person who works for the school district plays a vital role, but they may also wear different hats depending on the day or the time of year. As professionals, it is important that we value each other in the work that we do, as we are all here to prepare students for their future. We should never judge a book by its cover, as we should never judge a professional based on their job title. Each person is important and should feel valued. During the past 2 weeks of school, I was given the opportunity to support a first grade teacher as she was polling students individually for their fall FastBridge screeners. During this time, I was able to learn the classroom routines and procedures she had already put in place for her students, as well as continue to build my relationships with those students I taught last year in kindergarten. Of course, I want those first graders to know that I am their music teacher, but I also want them to know that I'm an educator and a human who's there to support them outside of the music room. As I walked in the shoes of this first grade teacher, I was able to realize all of the time and effort she has put in to create exploratory and creative activities for her students to utilize instead of simply doing something on their iPads. The students in that classroom were able to respect me as a teacher in their first grade classroom as well as the music room. I wish that we could all walk a day or an hour in another person's shoes so that we could better understand the many hats that they wear. We must always step back and remember that every person is important in the school district, from an elementary school to the IRC, to a middle school, to Mill Creek campus, to Harmony, to a high school, to OATC, to the food production, and so on. Everyone plays a vital role in preparing students for their future. Together we are stronger as a school district.
Thank you. Kaylin Campaign.
Hi, my name is Kaylin Campion. My son is an autistic second grader. We're currently supporting him privately with OT, counseling, and music therapy. I hope that when our evaluation is complete, Aiden is able to access those services in his home school. My principals created space for students to access sensory support. However, my son still wants to be in the classroom with his peers. I would love to be a part of an autism task force that can provide sensory corners in every grade so that students feel safe to regulate in their classroom. I've had other autistic families that attend Olathe reach out and ask me to share their stories. One from Woodland said, "We're a foster family, and special education and trauma-informed supports have always been difficult to come by. A recent battle we're struggling with is our daughter was diagnosed by her pediatrician, and it took over 6 months of advocating and hiring a private case manager to get her evaluated by the school. We scrape by with the 504 plan. Our daughter gets outside interventions because we've not received those services at school yet. We're strongly in support of more funding for the schools to make them holistically safer for our children and teachers. Please provide in-room support specialists and require routine training for staff to be trauma-informed." Ravenwood Elementary. I'm an adoptive mom of twin boys. In kindergarten, they were placed in a padded room alone, and they were dysregulated and would cry for me for an hour before I was notified. During COVID the break from school, their behaviors disappeared. As soon as we started school again, one of my boys was overstimulated and tried to leave the large classroom. Instead of a sensory room, they used a small empty room the size of a closet where his behaviors would escalate. The staff loved my son, and they went above and beyond. Ultimately, the general ed classroom was not the right placement for my son. We're now homeschooling because the team's hands were tied. Studies show that yoga helps students regulate. Moving our bodies and having breaks for breath work keep autistic students engaged. We need more training so teachers can co-regulate our kids so they can be in a sensory-safe environment with the public school. Olathe North. I'm an Olathe grad that was not diagnosed until I graduated high school. As a girl, I was bullied at school, but teachers would share that I was doing okay. I only really engaged with adults, and during class, I read books. I was never engaged in the classroom, and social situations gave me high anxiety. People would call me a freak, and I did not understand why. I felt I had to change who I was to be included, and experienced self-hatred because I was not safe to be neurodivergent. I wish I had been introduced to other neurotypical students like me, and that peers were taught to interact with disabled students. I wish autistic people were represented more at my school, so I would not have felt so alone. I wish I had access to a safe environment where an adult that understood autism could give me space to feel understood and to explore my passions. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Taylor.
Thank you for having me. My name is Stephen Taylor, and today I want to talk about teacher firings during a national teacher shortage. This board is set to vote at the end of this to fire a teacher at the end of this meeting who has incredible evaluations from administration, great relationships with the students, and who care deeply about their success. I am that teacher, and this is all because of TikTok, which is also not a sentence that existed 5 years ago. During my time at this district, I have worked to put students first. I got a grant my first year for $2,000 to build a recording and animation studio at our school. I supplied, started, and sponsored music club and gaming club because the students asked. My number one goal was student engagement and attendance. And when students were in my class, attendance was up and engagement was up. The number one thing that I taught my students is to ask questions because I want them to be curious and not compliant. Because I want to raise a generation of informed citizens instead of just child soldiers. I think that they should be able to provide a claim and give a reason, just like the standards say. In my class, my favorite thing to hear is why. Why are we learning this? Why does this matter? Because I want them to understand why. Which is why I'm so surprised to be here today. I wish I could say that I was getting fired for posting jokes on TikTok because at least that's a funny story. But that's not the case. I'm actually being fired for asking why. HR was made aware of 4 videos I posted and asked me to delete them. And instead of blindly complying, I had the audacity to ask why. What does the policy say? What are the reasons? I was put on administrative paid leave, and then I was given a cease and desist. All in the weeds, but all to say that I tried my best to collaborate and compromise into a solution. I eventually took down the videos. I wanted clear guidelines, but I never got them. When I did, I tried to work towards it. I tried my best to do what we push our students to do, which is to clarify, collaborate, and compromise to reach solutions. Pushing back was the worst offense that I did. I was given 2 options, resign or be terminated. Resigning would look better for my future, but it doesn't feel good for my present. Because I don't want to quit on my students. I never wanted to. But this district doesn't seem to care about that. Resigning means signing an NDA and being silent. But I don't really feel like that's fair. If the students were the priority in this district, then the problematic people who I've seen go before me would have been fired instead of me. But we know the truth, and that's that the priority here is not the students, it is silence. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Patty Lanter.
Hi again, I'm Patty, and I really like that teachers would have students ask why on everything. As a board, it is time to do something new for the children instead of repeating the same seeming mistakes of groups with financial or personal interests or political. It is extremely hard to believe that any of these things are unintentional over the past few years. There were so many coordinated decisions around the country that went against plans that were in place for such a situation. I listened to the NEA summer conference this recently, including both, this is weird, extremely political Becky Pringle and Department Secretary Cardona. They use language as a weapon, misrepresenting reality with grandiose verbiage and culty oration. I really hope the attendees of these things can see through the propaganda, but seeing what makes it into schools, they must actually believe it. Becky Pringle sees it as her mission to transform the union and schools into a vehicle for social justice. She claims that politics in classrooms is a threat to education while at the same time repeatedly pushes the NEA members to drive additional politics in the schools to create activists. Listening to Ms. Pringle and Secretary Cardona speeches, the goal of creating these activists is mentioned over and over again. Also mentions abortion and all sorts of other political causes. I did not hear academics once. There's lots of talk of hate and attacks with zero evidence of any of this, manipulation of language to evoke emotion without actual facts. It's a pretense to get away from actual policy issues. We see that a lot around here too. Bringing up concerns about extreme leftist political doctrine in the schools is not hate, but rather pointing out the fact that there is politics in the schools and it should not be there. When individuals use terms such as wants to destroy public education, just know that this is a lie. Being fiscally and ethically responsible is what boards and candidates should be. Growing the system just because you've been told to do so is unconscionable. There cannot be members aligned with these things or with administration. It is easy to find these partnerships. They wear the alignment proudly. I see this as a detriment to the children, and they will not have the children's back in the future. They will only serve to protect the money monster. Ask me later if you need more info. It is not their place to try to shape the morals of our children nor that of the board. And let's see. Second step has not been proven to be helpful for children according to the What Works Clearinghouse. Policies have been failing our kids. Taking more money from taxpayers does not fix the problem. It only grows the monster and still does not help the children. The graph over many years shows spending and achievement declines, and it drops severely in the past few years. If you actually listen to the words of, and we've lost students as well, if you actually listen to the words of the carnival barkers of the NEA and Department of Education, they are not actually saying anything real, just deflecting from their own blame. No more. Remember what happened, and it cannot happen again, ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Heidi Fenton.
Good evening. My name is Heidi Fenton, and my husband and I have 2 children. Our son is a junior at Olathe West, and he is thriving, and we couldn't be happier with the education he's receiving. Our daughter is having the opposite experience. My daughter is autistic, and I wanted to come here tonight to talk more about autism and spread awareness about girls on the autism spectrum in particular. You see, many girls get misdiagnosed or undiagnosed for years. If they are fortunate enough to get diagnosed in childhood, it is often much later than their male peers. And as we all know, early intervention is critical for children. Girls present much differently than their male peers, and in recent years we are getting better at understanding and diagnosing girls. Girls tend to present with extreme and debilitating anxiety, yet they are extraordinary at masking, as they want desperately to fit in with their peers. You won't see an autistic girl stimming as you do a boy, as their stims, or self-regulating behavior, might be more discreet or seen as self-harming in many instances. Or they hide it and mask it altogether. This masking over time leads to a mental health crisis. These girls desperately want to have friends and they want to fit in, but they lack the social skills and knowledge, and it becomes very stressful for them. Most often, girls are diagnosed when the gap between them and their peers begins to widen so far that they cannot keep up with the social demands any longer. The fake it till you make it stops working, and they begin to self-isolate, and mental illness kicks in. The characteristics they have in early childhood are more subtle, and they get passed off as being shy or an introvert, or a behavior challenge, or are seen as anxious. Our inpatient psychiatric residential facilities are filled with autistic girls that are experiencing a mental health crisis due to living in a world they can't make sense of and that doesn't make sense of them. This incongruence is taxing on their nervous system and mental health. Many of these girls get labeled with diagnoses such as eating disorders, bipolar, anxiety, depression, etc., when in reality they were undiagnosed as autism and their needs weren't being met. Autism is not a mental health disorder. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized as challenges with communication and development. It becomes a mental health disorder when the autistic learner's needs aren't being met. An autistic learner will have lagging skills in social pragmatic language, and they need specific and explicit instruction in social nuances and skills. They have challenges with sensory processing and how they experience the world through their sensory system. They will struggle with transitions and change, and that includes the transition from home, which is their safe place, to school or community. They may have a unique learning style and cognitive needs. They may have rigid and inflexible thinking and will struggle with executive functioning and planning. We cannot continue to dump our autistic learners into gen ed and not provide the appropriate supports and accommodations with individual plans. All us parents want is for our children to be seen and valued and for them to be meaningfully educated. We support public schools and we support the teachers. The teachers are amazing, but they need more help and support. We need more SLPs that understand autism and their unique language needs. We need more OTs that understand sensory processing. We need more special education teachers that understand autism, and we need more autism specialists. We need specific programming at the middle school and high school levels for our learners. Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie Van Buskirk.
Good evening. I wanted to point out that Dr. Yeager has Eagles colors, and my kid is probably delighted at home, and we would probably be the only people in the district excited about that.
I'm a Chiefs fan, just for the record.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Yeager. Carrie Van Buskirk. I'm a proud Olathe parent, and I have a recent graduate from Olathe South and a junior. My oldest has autism, and my junior also has disabilities. Thank you for considering my comments this evening. As I've shared in previous comments, I've always felt heard by leadership, and I value an ongoing collaborative partnership. Unfortunately, my family was stricken with COVID the last month, and I plan to meet with you all soon now that we're healthy. I think it's important to note that our leadership has been very gracious to me to reach out in an effort to engage in thoughtful dialogue, and I look forward to that. I've said a lot lately, and I wanted to take a moment to comment on some data that popped out to me. Dr. Leach, thank you so much for your time and effort on that extensive work. What popped out to me that has a relationship to what I wanted to talk about is our disabled community, 17% of them in that CAP data are ready for college and careers. And there were no green bands for our disabled community in that data. And those outcomes worry me. And I think it's something that we need to zero in on and really look at what that means and what we could be doing differently to bring those numbers up and improve those numbers. Because I'm celebrating with you all that a lot of our population is doing great, but that population is struggling. That goes into what I'd like to say a little bit. As I said, I've said a lot in the past regarding autism, and I want to keep up with the big picture and not individualized experiences. As an advocate, I'm seeing and I fear that we're losing several of our autism families to homeschool. We're losing them to private placements and other out-of-district options for schooling because we just don't have appropriate placements for a certain segment of the population that needs small sensory-friendly learning environments with explicit social skills teaching, executive functioning support, along with social emotional support and academic remediation. While looking at our autism programs, we currently have 2 different placements, Autism 1 and Autism 2, that encompass 13 total autism classrooms throughout our district. We have 4 classrooms serving our preschool population, 6 throughout 36 elementary buildings, 2 in our 10 middle school buildings, and 1, just 1, in our high school, 5 high school buildings.
Carrie, sorry, your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vanessa Dittman.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vanessa Dittman, and my son Alistair is in 3rd grade here in Cedar Creek Elementary. I understand that there's apparently some sort of game tonight, so I'm going to be quick because I think I'm standing between most of these people and leaving. As I mentioned, my son is Alistair Dittman. He has a diagnosis of both autism and ADHD. His path through the public school system in this district has been quite rocky. Most of the difficulties we grapple with stem from the lack of sufficient or quality support. If I had to articulate our struggle in a sentence, it would be finding a way to implement my son's IEP and BIP with integrity despite ever-mounting odds. Without question, inconsistency in support and response to behaviors creates distrust in children, particularly if they're on the spectrum, and that in turn makes it close to impossible for them to access public education. When my son started kindergarten, he was transitioning from an early intervention ABA program. That team provided the opinion that my son would have no problem in mainstream if he had the right support and modifications. Fast forward to this year, and we are in full isolation, barely making it half days with no peer model interaction. The start to the year has been so traumatic that we have made the decision to pull him for homeschooling. Instead of talking about our experience itself, I'd like to provide some constructive proposals for change. We all have the same goal here, right? To provide a free and appropriate public education to the students in this district. But how do we do that for kids on the spectrum that exist in this so-called gray area of autism, who are verbal, capable of accessing the curriculum, but still need significant support? The biggest low-hanging fruit is training. Staff needs training. Direct support of staff trained in supporting children with autism is an absolute necessity. Training during in-service days is reasonable, cost-effective, possible. Bring in consultants, BCBAs, speech paths. Train your staff on handling children with autism. Second, the district needs a solution to support the entire population of kids on the spectrum. We've been denied access to the autism program multiple times because my son is so verbal and capable of accessing the curriculum. The only autism supports available to us are thus indirect or temporary. That's not going to work for a child with a primary diagnosis of autism who also has significant needs. Add on to your autism program, create a level for these children, or better yet, create magnet schools that contain autism classrooms built for these children that help support them through the day so they can be more successful during mainstream time. Lastly, if the resources aren't there or supports aren't added, change the policy on allowing outside therapists to come support during a school day. We have an in-home ABA therapist that's more than willing to help support during a school day, but we've been denied utilizing her because she is somehow seen as for-profit, which is apparently prohibited from operating on school grounds. There has to be a way around that policy when children are suffering. My plea to you tonight is to listen to us. We are the voices of children in this district struggling immensely through irreversible trauma from just one school day. They need help. As it stands now, their education is just not accessible. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to 6.01. 15 minutes. We need 15 minutes for an executive session. I'll entertain a motion on that.
Move that the board go into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters pursuant to non-elected personnel, exception under coma, and that the board return to the regular meeting at 8 p.m. in this room.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Wycliffe and a second by Mr. Kuhn.
Mr. Boyd?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
Dr. Yurkovich?
Yes.
Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Because all the
Pardon me?
No action coming out of here.
Do we have a motion
No.
that we have to do? 'Cause I'm- You did it DOA. What is it?
No, because
It's HR. It's an HR report.
Thank you. Thank you, yes, got it.
All right, welcome back. Moving on to action consent 7.01 through 7.12. Any questions from any board members?
I'd move to approve action consent items 7.01 through 7.12 as presented.
Second.
Oh, one more time. That was too many voices.
Second by all.
Actually, need one. I don't.
Joe.
All right.
Joe.
We have a motion by Mr. Wycliffe and a second by Mr. Beveridge.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
Dr. Yurkovich?
Yes.
Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
Mr. Boyd?
Yes. All right, motion carries 7-0. All right, action bids, contracts, and agreements. I know we have a question about 8.01. Anything else we need to pull out of there? All right, seeing that, I'll take a motion for 8.02 through 8.05.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Wycliffe and a second by Mr. Beveridge.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
Dr. Yurkovich?
Yes.
Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
Mr. Boyd?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
All right, 8.01. Mr. Connell, I know you have a question, so I'll go ahead and
Thank
open
you.
the floor
Thank
for
you.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Yes, so my question would be, is I want to understand, first, I'm not a fan of the e-hall pass process, especially when our language says help curb mischief, meetups, vandalism, et cetera. It was used against kids during COVID for proximity. My question really has to do with when they choose not to use e-hall pass. They have the right not to install on their personal device, right? Is it installed on all district distributed devices?
So first off, thank you. It's my first time speaking to the board, so it's a pretty cool experience. So just to clarify, eHall Pass is not actually an app, so it doesn't actually get installed. It's a web-based, so they go to the ehallpass.com site. They log in with their district credentials, and it goes through that way. So there's no app actually on the student device because there's no app for a Windows computer. It's all based on.
So there's no locator function in it at all?
There's no geolocation feature of it at all. It's more just like a timer to know how long a student's been gone and to keep track of that.
When I was looking at it and reading about it online, that's one of the things that did is that there is an aspect of it that has a geolocator. So you could identify where people were within the building if it was installed on their devices. So there is an app function of it, but we're not using the app function. Is that what I'm correctly hearing?
We do not install any app function whatsoever.
That's what I wanted to hear. Okay, I'm done.
Josh, great job for your first time.
Yeah, thank you.
Short and sweet.
All right, is there a motion for 8.01?
Move to approve 8.01 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Wycliffe and a second by Mr. Kuhn.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
Dr. Yurkovich?
Yes.
Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
Mr. Boyd?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
All right, action other. We're going to take these individually. So 9.01. Mr. Connell, I know you have questions about that, so I'll let you start.
So I just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. On the site council assignments, those schools have been distributed across all 7 board members, is that correct? And those are separate from the district-wide, correct?
Correct.
What would, do we as board members reach out to those school principals and say, hey, I've been assigned to that, your site council would like to be invited? Because frankly, I wasn't invited to any site councils last year or two. And I'm wondering, how do we get connected to be at those facilities?
Yeah, it's been my experience that the principal will reach out to board members.
Okay, that happened the last 2 years, so that's what I'm asking. So
Okay. I'm sure Dr.
only-
Yeager will make sure that that happens going forward.
Yeah, we'll make sure that happens, and also Dr. Veach is currently collecting all the dates for all the site councils across the district as well, so we'll have two mechanisms to make sure that you get those.
Okay, great, because I know there weren't dates, because some of them have them more often than others, some have them manually, that kind of stuff. And some of them tied to their PTO meetings, and some of them tied to events. The other second element that was not published until that I saw it today was the BOE committees. It does exclude me from that, and again, I will say that I don't, can't approve of that or vote for that. So, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on 9.01? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Wycliffe and a second by Dr. Yurkovich.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
Dr. Yurkovich?
Yes.
Mr. Vavridge?
Yes.
Mr. Boyd?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
No.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
All right, motion carries 6-1. All right, 9.02. Any questions?
So
Mr. Connell?
my question is that if I understand correctly, we are asking for the authority for the maximum line LOB that's available, whether we use it or not. So,
We are using it. This is a new development. It's apparently been in statute for a very long time. It seems counterintuitive. Our public years ago voted to take the LOB to 33% permanently. However, each year that 33% is above the average of the state, you still have to do a resolution in order to use the 33%.
Okay.
And so the KSDE clarified and asked districts to start doing this resolution. And this is not my first time speaking to the board.
So the state numbers it reads is 31.6, and though in 2015 locally the district was it the district vote or was it a vote?
There was a vote. Yes,
Okay.
there was a ballot.
It was a ballot vote. Okay. So we're really just approving a resolution to a vote of an approved element from the voters itself.
Correct.
Just want to make sure I was clear.
Correct.
Thank you.
Board, any other questions?
Move to approve 9.02 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Beveridge and a second by Mr. Wycliffe.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
Dr. Yurkovich?
Yes.
Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
Mr. Boyd?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. All right, 9.03. Mr. Connell, go ahead. I know you have
Okay,
a
yeah,
couple
go
questions.
ahead. So Mr. Hutchinson, while you're up here, so there are a couple questions for you. There's a lot of data, a lot of docs. So thank you for having all those out for me to look at.
Sure.
And it could take years. So a couple questions on particular line items. Could you share publicly the food budget, right? The food service budget went up 50% or 25%, right? Went from 60 million to 20 million. Can you articulate what's happened in the food chain, what's happened in the ecosystem, what's happened in the world in which that has increased so much? Or what's happened within the district? Because I think there's two dynamics happening.
One of the dynamics is what we feel in our own households, just the supply chain and what the cost of food is what's driving the costs up. And then the federal reimbursement is, as you know, we didn't have to increase prices because revenue is also going up as well to help offset those costs. But the main driver is the cost of food.
Okay, that's what I want to hear on that. Second thing, the next thing is, would you please share what the special liability expense fund is as itemized in the budget?
Sure. Special liability fund is utilized to purchase liability insurance. It can handle claims like one of our mowers throws a rock into a windshield, it's below our deductible, we can pay for things like that out of there, or settlements from lawsuits, and legal fees related to lawsuits that are a liability type claim.
Sure, so I'd like to read into the record, State Kansas 72-1179 Special Liability Expense Fund uses of money. There is hereby established in every school district a special liability expense fund. Monies in such funds shall be used for pay the cost of providing for its defense and the defense of employees pursuant to the Kansas Tort Claims Law and for the payment of claims and other direct and indirect costs relating from such acts. Pay judgments rendered against the district, so law, and the district shall credit, and basically goes on to tell how it's funded from different levies. So we're actually have various levies.
We do.
Over the last 3 years, that particular line item has gone from 600 to 775. This next year, it's projected a little over $1 million. Is that correct?
It is.
1.1. So can you definitively say that not $1 in that is coming from teacher salaries, education, because that is a separate line item? Is that correct?
That is correct. The only time it would come from general fund is if it exceeded, like if you had multiple claims in a year and that fund wasn't big enough. That's why we're kind of growing it, just because the fact is we're facing more and more of those types of challenges in districts. So,
because there's a lot of misinformation in the community that says that those funds that are dealing with lawsuits are coming from teachers' paychecks, and they are not.
They are not.
They are not. Last thing is, I wanted to make sure I'm reading it correctly, is that the instruction budget is 51% of the new budget. We've increased teachers' pay substantially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you share how, as a percentage of the gross budget, how we match up with Blue Valley or Shawnee Mission or Wichita? Are most of them at or about half of the gross budget being teacher and pay, or is it higher, is it lower?
I'd have to do the analysis, but it's got to be in the general realm. There's also a budget at a glance. You'll see a bar graph. That's the state as a whole. I'd have to separate out like the Johnson County districts, but we tend to be very similar in the percentage that's going into the salaries or the instructional line. I will say instruction, we defined it very clear and by the law about 10 years ago. We went through a change in our chart of accounts, and districts could misclassify a certain expenditure and call it instruction. There can be confusion at times. For example, coaches are instructional. Librarians or counselors are not. They're support, which is a different coding. So sometimes over time those can get mixed up and we'll be off a little bit from each other. But we went through a very detailed process to make sure ours were all classified properly.
Because that's what I was going to ask, is that student support services went up $5 million, and it's $14 million up from 2 years ago. Did you just say that student support services include coaches? What other things does student support services include that we've got
a lot, and the thing you have to remember is this is all funds, so there could be support over in capital outlay. I'd have to take a look at the breakdown, but there's counselors, there's all of the assessment groups are support, and support's divided into instructional support and administrative support, so there's different categories.
I also want to give you an opportunity to clarify some information, is that there is actuals for 22, 23, and 21, 22. That's the actual expenditures, even though the proposed budget was in excess of that number. The 22, 23 number comes in about $13, $14 million under the original proposed budget. So this is the budget. We don't have to spend it all. We may not spend it all. And those 2 years were, 21, 22 was above their budget. 2022, 23 was below the budget. Would that be an accurate assessment of your understanding?
Correct. And there's also buffering, as I've described to the board before, that usually does not come to be. So they tend to be inflated, but we have to set them as, we can't increase them later on without republishing, so we have the buffering.
That's a safety. Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I had.
All right. Board members, any other questions on 9.03? I'll entertain a motion, please.
Move to approve 9.03 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Beveridge and a second by Mr. Wycliffe.
Dr. Yurkovich,
Yes.
Mr. Beveridge,
Yes.
Mr. Boyd,
Yes.
Mr. Connell,
No.
Mr. Kuhn,
No.
Mrs. Steele,
Yes.
Dr. Wycliffe, or Mr. Wycliffe.
Yes. Bill, I appreciate that.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, motion passes 5-2. All right, moving on to 9.04. Mr. Connell, the floor is yours, sir.
Sure. So thank you first, Mr. Yeager, thank you for adding to the agenda. As per board policy, anything can be added to an agenda from any person in the community, any taxpayer, any staff member, at any point in time prior to a board meeting. That is in board policy. So when I requested this be added, this is to consider a resolution to remove the censure, but I would like to ask a question because it seems kind of interesting. Would anyone on the board please share what you believe the censure on May 16th was for and what the purpose of the current censure is?
Mr. Connell, I would just say that, you know, we aren't required to answer any questions that you have of us. But you still do have the floor to make any other statements that you wish to make.
Okay. So the post is an actual copy of that provided by Mr. Kuhn in the July meeting in which, excuse me, sorry, Ms. Steele, I'll wait.
So the floor is yours.
Yeah, but you guys are having a conversation. I didn't want to interrupt.
We are. The floor is
I
yours,
had
sir.
a point of clarification with him regarding the censure being in writing from that meeting, right? And he just clarified that yes, it is.
So there is a censure in writing, however, it is extremely vague. It has no end time or termination date. So that makes it an illegal document at this point in time, and I would like to offer the board an opportunity to amend it, adjust it on the fly, yes. Amend it to provide some kind of documentation as to when you expect it to expire. And if the board chooses not to, then I would like to know what your intent is. What is your intent for the censure?
Mr. Connell,
Because I think it needs to go. It's time.
we are on action other 9.04, which is a resolution regarding removing or reconsidering your censure. At this moment, you have the floor to make any statements you wish, and if you are done making your statement, then I'll entertain a motion by any other board member.
No, then I'll continue a little bit.
Okay.
So in it I read, whereas the district staff at the direction of the Board of Education overstepped their authority, there is no board policy, there is no district policy for you to offer a censure. Their authority to enforce security measures against board member Brian Connell. In that particular case, I was given a cease and desist, and I was given a banishment from the school facilities. And under the fact that the school district has a registered police force, if a registered police force member has someone banned for trespass, which I now have in writing, that they must give a who and a why and a how in a case. And there was no who and a how and a why in a case provided to me. So I find that, so legally, that puts the board at risk. Brian Connell, without due process, violated his constitutional rights. In fact, that not only did you not offer me an opportunity to defend myself, Mr. Wycliffe at that time as the board president chose to not even allow me to make comments after other comments were made. I had to go first. And the board resolution itself did not state or stipulate which board member, so there is no ability to prepare to defend myself in such a case, in a public dialogue. Related to that, the board chose to do a special section without recording, without the advent of the public documentation of what was said and not said, other than personal recording devices. So, whereas the Board of Education has held different standards for board members' behavior. Example, we have Joe Beveridge, who stopped a person in the middle of their statements, then threw them out, and has run up over $250,000 worth of legal fees to defend him and the board for not standing up to him at that period of time. We also had Mr. Boyd, yourself, and another person reach out, Shannon Wycliffe, cut off Lietta Felter in the October board meeting of 2021, and no one censured you all. We have Julie Steele telling a family that they should move out of the district if they didn't agree
Mr.
with the DEI
President.
and SEL, and no one's censuring her.
Excuse me,
Mr. Connell has the
Con-
floor, Dr. Yurkovich.
I do have the floor.
Continue, sir.
Mr. Boyd, you weren't even present in the May 4th board meeting, so you have no firsthand experience or knowledge with that particular day with which to have made a voice or a vote. Dr. Yurkovich had only been on the board for 3 days, so she has no prior experience from which to prove otherwise, other than that someone got emotional and raised their voice. So I've had no one accuse me legally, no one file a case against me, and I'm an elected official who has the right to the First Amendment right to say what I want, where I want in a public dialogue. The board has no policy of any kind for punishment or use of censure. So you all did something to punish me, and then your comments that were various comments are made slandered, defamed me, and there are copies of those in a public meeting. And there were falsehoods stated by individuals of the board. So what I've written here is an attempt to avoid future litigation and to allow our newly appointed board president, vice president, which you guys are new, which neither of y'all have reached out much about this, about when it's going to be done, when it's going to be changed, if it's going to be changed. With a positive and a cohesive board, I moved to remove any and all security measures taken against citizen Brian Connell. I still, while the end of the school year ended, I still walked through the buildings under the proposed threat from the district that at any point in time, per your censure, could withdraw my ability to access any facility and building as an elected member of this community. And I mentioned to immediately revoke the censure actions under which 5 members placed member Connell on May 16th. So that's into my statements.
Dr. Yurkovich?
Go ahead.
All right. Board, any other comments on 9.04? All right. Mr. Connell, I would just say this. You know I have reached out to you multiple times.
You text on
Hold on,
August
sir. I
8th.
have the floor, sir. I did not interrupt you. I have reached out to you multiple times. I have
Go ahead.
the emails between you and I stating that I would love to get rid of this. I would love to find a way that you and I could work together and move forward. And so for you to say that that hasn't happened, that's not true.
You do not have an
Sir,
email to me. Produce
sir,
the email.
I
and
have
publish
the
it.
floor.
Publish it.
I have the floor.
Go ahead.
I will, because I have the floor. I do not interrupt you. And I even stopped another board member from interrupting you.
Thank you.
So please, give me the same courtesy that I gave you. Please, give me the same courtesy that I gave you.
I am Mr. Boyd. Thank you.
Again, I have told you, I would love to move past this, but the language in this resolution is a non-starter. I can't, there's no way that I can support this. So if you want to go back and next month bring another resolution with some clear language, some clean language, I'll revisit that at that time. But today, I can't support this. See no other comments?
I'd like to respond, Mr. President, with a comment.
Sir, see no other comments? Barb, can you take the roll, please, on this vote?
Sir, Mr. Boyd, you gave me an opportunity. I gave you an opportunity to speak.
Sir?
You have not produced an email to me.
You do not have the
with any
floor.
resolution.
Mr. Connell, you do not have the floor.
Mr. President.
Mr. President,
You do
made
not
a
have the
statement
floor.
that allows me an opportunity to
Mr.
respond.
Connell, can you
You're
please
changing
control
the
yourself?
rules. There's no policy that says you have
Please
the ability
control
to do
yourself, sir.
Mr. Boyd, can I ask
Mr. Bevitt has the
you
floor.
have not been
Mr. Bevitt.
honest.
So there was, I think in his comments was a motion, but there has not been a second to my knowledge. So I don't know what we're voting on yet.
We have not made a motion, so I'll make the motion that we make the motion to vote on 9.04 as written.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Connell and a second by Mr. Wycliffe.
Mr. Beveridge,
No.
Mr. Boyd,
No.
Mr. Connell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Mrs. Steele,
No.
Mr. Wycliffe,
No.
Dr. Yurkovich.
No.
The motion fails 5-2.
Thank you.
Moving on to future action items. Board members, at your own leisure, please read through those and be prepared for senior questions to Dr. Yeager in advance so he can get answers to you. We do have 2 written reports, the Head Start report and the 2022 bond September 23 update. Topics for discussion for board members.
I have comments, but I'll defer to anyone else who would like to go first.
Mr. Connell?
So there is no other comments? Okay. So, as I take a deep breath, thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts. To clear and gather my thoughts, I will start by doing something a little different. I'm going to say a little simple prayer. Dear God and creator of the universe and creator of every soul in this room, in our schools and in our community, thank you. With gratitude, I thank you for the kids and the teachers, the staff, the administrators, and even these school board members. With the way things are and worries many carry within them, we ask you to bring your hand upon all of us to bring peace where we see chaos, bring comfort when we feel pain or frustration or hurt. Bring your voice of justice, freedom, goodness, kindness, love, and understanding into the midst of discord, the untruths, and the upsetting. This is just one day, one moment in a larger life. This too shall pass. With God, all things are possible. Related comments to those struggling in any way listening to this, I pray peace and healing and strength. Be human. Reach out to those who need you, who need encouragement, who need kindness, or an invitation just to feel alive. We have kids in our schools who are sitting by themselves. We have kids who are struggling, who don't speak the language, that are new. They need that invitation. Everyone feels different at some point in life. Feels different on the outside. They feel down and lost at times. Don't give up. It can and will get better. We have had so many suicides in this community in the last handful of years, and it pains me and it troubles me, but suicide is not an answer to you as adults or kids. Too many, and close to 600 in Kansas per year, suicides are happening because these individuals are bullied, harassed, pushed into a depression state so dark that they see dying sounds better than living. We have an obligation to find all those kids. Keep them alive. They can't learn if we aren't keeping them alive. Kansas is listed dead last in all 50 states in the United States for mental health. Dead last. We've got to do better. And that includes Olathe, Johnson County, and our schools. 80% of our suicides are men, boys. As we are failing our girls and women, our world is failing boys and men even more at a higher rate in every age group. Statistics are out there. These stats are only those who are successful in suicide. And let's be honest, successful in suicide ain't a good thing. The attempted numbers are exponential and nearly catastrophic. You can get those from Tim DeWeese in the county, you can get them from the state. Our psych wards, our hospitals are overflowing. It's dangerous. Despite zero reason why and other efforts, this isn't enough if even one child commits suicide. Every child is unique, special, and created by God, perfect, exactly as they are. Period. Children need parents to love them, guide them, and prepare them to be adults. Schools are temporary and partial partners. but critical partners in the role of helping kids learn how to learn, not just what to learn. We all need to partner better together today and tomorrow. We have adults in this community who would go ape crap if somebody bullied them the way they're going after me. We have a state senator who's going after my daughter to get to me, and I got it in writing. We have individuals coming on my property causing damage. And don't smirk, because I know you videotape, and I want it on your videos. Go ahead and put them on your TikToks, Nikki. I see all your comments. Yeah, I'll call you out. Stay away from my house, stay away from my daughter. Leave my daughter's friends alone at Olathe North. I will start GoFunding or whatever it takes to hire lawyers to come after everybody coming after me and my family. Leave my kids alone at college. Stop. It's at the point in time I get really angry, and I'm not really angry yet. The bullying on this board and your acceptance of your friends and supporters who come and do things, stop. I've said it again, we're in election season. Don't steal signs, leave their families alone, their wives, their kids, period. If your wives and spouses or your husbands or family members are commenting on my public pages, probably not a good thing. They kind of expose themselves. Stop. This has to stop. This board shows its model of bullying in May, without even giving me the opportunity to tell them what was going on or to explain what was going on and why I was angry. In fact, poor Miss Yurkovich, she probably thinks shell's on to her, but my comment was to Mr. Yeager. I never called anybody sissy. Those are falsehoods. Joe Beveridge accused me of pushing through a board event in February of 2023, in March of 2022, all by myself. His quotes, all by himself. But I have Dr. Yeager and Leetta Felter's emails and texts included in that conversation. Mr. Beveridge knew that I was going to be upset in that meeting. That's why he was quick to accept the fact that I needed a 10-minute break, because they knew they were going to take away filmed comments and public comments. You all are not blameless in all the chaos you guys have created. And Joe Beveridge, had you held your tongue for another 60 seconds, the district would not have spent now over $250,000 defending you and this board with a First Amendment issue. I will admit, and I seem to be the only one that has accepted any responsibility at all for my actions or getting upset. Every one of you all are responsible. Do better. I'm finished with my comments.
Are there any other comments from our board members? Is it still?
I'd just like to encourage a rereading of Policy BH. Much of what Mr. Connell fought very hard to keep in policy that has been violated this evening, and I think it's important to reread that. I'd also like to make sure it's publicly known that I'm not sure why removing a security measure that was placed during the censure is part of your requested resolution when that was lifted some time ago. When we instilled the censure, we left it up to our security team to decide when that should be lifted, and it was lifted some time ago. You haven't had a security measure for quite some time. So I will leave my comments at that, other than to say I think from this dais, calling out a member of the community in the way that you did tonight is inexcusable.
Board, any other comments? I would just like to say that, to all of our families and our students that's watching this, I think it's important to remember when we are out in public. When I'm out in public, I definitely try to remember that, I not only represent myself in this position, I represent, the Olathe School District, I represent this board, I represent my family, my kids, my grandmother, who taught me, the golden rule: treat people how you want to be treated. There's an incredible responsibility when someone goes into a voting booth and they check your name. The weight is enormous, and sometimes sitting here, it's hard and it's sometimes difficult to take off the elected official hat and put on, Brad, the person hat. And I'll be honest, I'm really struggling to manage that tonight, because I wasn't the only person that was attacked this evening. There was other board members that were attacked, and it doesn't feel great. But I remember, when you sign up to serve, you do put a target on your back. When you sign up to serve, you agree to swallow some of your pride for the betterment of the service. When you sign up to serve, you live with folks coming to your house, placing signs on your property. That happened to me. You sacrifice so much, all of us do, to serve. And it doesn't feel great when, you get called names and, your motives are questioned and people think you're doing funny stuff with money and, all the conspiracy theories that's going out, it's just terrible. But I remember, this isn't about me. This isn't about, the seven of us sitting up here. This is about the students and the families that trusted us to make decisions for their betterment. So for me, I'll remember my why. I remember why I'm here. And that's to serve the students and the families in our community. Dr. Yeager.
Thank you. I almost didn't make my comments tonight for a variety of reasons, but the truth is that we have an amazing staff and amazing students in this system, so I'm going to move forward with my comments tonight because they deserve it. The first thing I want to say is thanks to our staff and our community for an amazing start to the school year. You all have had the opportunity to walk through schools and be part of events in schools and see the excitement that has come with the beginning of the school year. And I can't express enough thanks to our staff, our community, for all that they've done to move forward, in a positive way and have a great start to the school year. So I did want to mention that. In challenges that we have, there are great things that happen in our system. One of them is the recent recognition that we're number 4 in terms of best employers in the state of Kansas. It's interesting because there are awards and recognitions that school districts can receive where we apply for them, and we do a lot to try to win those awards and what have you. This one is special because we don't do anything to get this award. This is, a process that Forbes uses to identify employers and what have you that are doing a bang-up job for their employees. And so this one means a lot. And, this one is less about district leadership or what happens in the boardroom, in my opinion. It's about the way our staff interacts with each other. the way our staff supports each other each and every day. And our job is to provide the resources to help them do that the best they can for all of us in this room. So I'm so appreciative of that. But it really is a thanks to our staff and also our community who values our educators and those who work in our school system so much that that award really goes to. There's some exciting things coming up in the district. Our first committee next week around start and end time happens. So Dr. McMullen is going to be the star act the first night along with others as we start that conversation again next week. I really want to express some appreciation for all of our secondary schools, our middle schools, and our high schools who this week have facilitated focus groups for our students in those schools, just to get their feedback about start and end time. And those student voices are obviously really important to us in that conversation and what have you with that. Also, September 26th is our first community conversation. Communications has pushed that out, I think, as of yesterday, so that information is out. And that's from 9 to 10:30 in the morning here in the Board of Education room. You may remember some of those we do in the morning, some of them we do in an evening, and our attempt really is to have times available that meet the needs of everyone in our community in different ways. Those of you that have been in Olathe for a while know that a very important event happens Saturday, and that is the Old Settlers Parade. I think it's still the largest parade in the state of Kansas, right here in Olathe. It's a great time to get a Grange pup, but also more importantly, see our students doing amazing things. We'll have bands out there and student clubs and a variety of students representing our district so well. And cool this year, for the first time, actually the Olathe administrators are going to have a float in the parade. So we'll have, I think, just shy of 50 administrators in the parade, passing out not candy, little erasers to students and what have you, because we want something they can use in schools. So there will be a large group out this weekend doing that, which is really cool and exciting. Community engagement by our administrators in the community. You also know that fall sports and activities and plays have all started. It's such a cool time of year to see our students engaged in different things. But as cool as it is to see our students engaged, seeing our families in the theaters and in our stands and involved in our schools, supporting our young people is really fantastic as well. Sometimes in the world we wonder how our young people are doing, and sometimes we get feedback that's really not expected. So on our website there's a contact us button, and that's a place where anybody can go, and typically we don't get compliments there. Typically they're questions and concerns, but occasionally we get a compliment. And I just wanted to share one that we got this week that I think just exemplifies the kind of cool things our young people do. And this is from somebody who does not live in our area. I just wanted to say that last night, while at Brahms Restaurant in Emporia, Dr. Berry, if you're out there, I know that was your favorite place to have ice cream. Person said, I just wanted to say last night, while at the Brahms Restaurant in Emporia, Kansas, at about 8:30 p.m., your ladies' tennis team came in to eat. These young ladies were polite, respectful, and very well-mannered. I stopped to visit with a few of them as I was leaving, and they seemed to enjoy each other's company, as they let me know that one of the girls had won the singles title, and while the others were not enjoying as much success, they still enjoyed the experience. I myself was heading back to Topeka after attending a Washburn Rural High School soccer game at Wichita Northwest High School. It always brings a smile to my face knowing that there are still many great kids out there, and the future of our country will be in good hands when it's their turn to take over. You can be proud of your tennis team as they represented your school so very well. How cool is that? Yeah. So those are my comments tonight.
Thank you, sir. How much do we need for the last executive session?
25 minutes, please.
All right, moving on to 14.01, 25 minutes. I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the board go into executive session. What, for the purpose of? Sorry. Thank you. For the purpose of consultation, sorry, I lost my place. For the purpose of consultation with an attorney for the body or agency for which to be deemed privileged an attorney-client relationship under COMA, and that the board return to the regular meeting at 9:20 in this room.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Steele and a second by Mr. Wycliffe.
Mr. Beveridge,
Yes.
Mr. Boyd,
Yes.
Mr. Connell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Mrs. Steele,
Yes.
Mr. Wycliffe,
Yes.
Dr. Yurkovich.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. A resolution to.
I move to approve the authorization of acceptance of the settlement offer for government entity claims against Altria and authorize Dr. Brent Yeager to sign all documents necessary to effectuate the settlement.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Steele and a second by Mr. Wycliffe.
Dr. Yurkovich,
Yes.
Mr. Wycliffe,
Yes.
Mrs. Steele,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Mr. Connell,
Yes.
Mr. Boyd,
Yes.
Mr. Beveridge.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. We are adjourned.